Hi everyone, welcome back to Radio Night Crime. Before you drift off, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. If you're enjoying the stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's relax and jump into tonight's case. Story 1. October 19th, 2021. Evansville, Indiana. Just before 11 p.m., a frantic woman flagged down an Indiana State Police trooper with a frightening story to tell. Her name was Cynthia, and she was hysterical, having just escaped from a house. She said that police needed to go straight over to Evansville's west side, 1801 Stinson Avenue. Cynthia had been called to the house by one of her friends, Heidi, asking for her to help clean up as they were waiting on a landlord's inspection. They ordered a pizza and cleaned a couple of the downstairs rooms before a noise could be heard coming from one of the upstairs bedrooms. Cynthia then noticed some blood on Heidi's shoes and a concealed gun that was in her possession. A few minutes later, she heard a very loud and very definite cry for help. Not sure what was going on, Cynthia tentatively sat down on what she thought was a pile of laundry, but as soon as she sat down, she felt something underneath. Slowly peeling back the blankets, she realized it wasn't a something. It was a someone, and they were very clearly dead. She ran straight for the door, but in that moment, Heidi's boyfriend appeared and instantly tried to stop her from leaving. She pushed past and managed to escape, running as fast as she could, eventually flagging down the car for help. Just before midnight, Evansville police started gathering outside the house on Stinson Avenue. The events that had transpired inside up until that point were shocking and terrifying, but no one really had any idea what was going on in that moment. All police knew was what Cynthia had told them. It seemed there was a woman being held captive inside and one man was already dead. But how many people were involved and/or lived there and what actually was happening remained unclear. Body cam footage from outside the house picked up everything happening minute by minute. Before long, a man hurried out with his hands above his head. He told police his name was Jason and this was his house, but he was completely innocent in whatever it was that was going on. He said there were more people inside, including his 2 children, and he had instructed them to hide upstairs when he saw the flashing lights and heard the police from outside. Officers then spent several more minutes trying to get everyone else out. Another man then came out holding something in his hand that, from a distance, resembled a gun. Police said he was moving very quickly and seemed aggressive in his manner. He was ignoring their instructions to put whatever was in his hands down. It is unconfirmed what the object actually was, but it was determined that it was not a firearm. Officers said they had to act fast, and when he started moving towards them, holding his hands out in a shooting stance, they fired, killing him instantly. As police moved in towards the house, a woman appeared as well. This woman was 36-year-old Heidi Kathleen Carter, and more body cam footage picked up her being patted down, uncovering the revolver that she had been concealing. She was then placed in handcuffs. Police finally started entering the house. As they moved through the rooms, they found a severely beaten woman tied to a bed and the lifeless body of a man that would turn out to be 50-year-old Timothy Ivy. The woman tied to the bed was Timothy's girlfriend, and she was taken to hospital immediately to treat her terrible injuries. That left police with Heidi Carter. The man who had been shot and killed was her boyfriend, Carrie Hammond. We've got a Heidi Carter and a Carrie Hammond, the same man that had tried to stop Cynthia from escaping. We start tonight by following up with the disturbing details behind the murder on Stinson Avenue on Evansville's west side. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brad Bird. And I'm Shelley Kirk. The news broke when Evansville police shot and killed a man who looked like he was wielding a gun. But we are now learning the events leading up to that shooting are horrific. Police said they were still trying to find out what on earth had happened. And as they approached Jason, who lived at the property, he was able to give some clarification. He said he had been out until about 8 p.m. and got back not realizing anything was wrong. He said he had gone straight to bed when he came home as he was suffering from kidney stones and was in a lot of pain. He said his family were the same, having not been home long and having not seen anything untoward either. Jason said he and his family were in total shock, and the police were satisfied that none of them knew anything or were involved in any way. For those who may not know me, I'm Sergeant Anna Gray with the Evansville Police Department. Around 11 p.m., Evansville police officers were dispatched to the area of Stinson Avenue and James Avenue to assist Indiana State Police for a possible kidnapping and murder. Officers from multiple agencies, including EPD, arrived on scene and found out the incident actually occurred at 1801 Stinson Avenue. The reporter was still on scene and told officers that she went to the residence to visit with Heidi Carter. While she was inside the residence, she saw a dead body and ran out of the home to get help. A male resident walked out of the home, complied with officers and told officers that there were other individuals still inside, including his 2 teenage children. Officers located 36-year-old Heidi Carter outside of the home near a vehicle. Officers surrounded the home and called out other residents with a loud verbal command, also using a loudspeaker. Over the next 4 minutes, officers continued to yell commands at another male that they could see just inside the doorway. After officers gave numerous loud verbal commands, the male disregarded their commands and rushed out of the front door in an aggressive manner. He was holding an object in his hand that he pointed at officers. Once officers were able to determine that the suspect was no longer a threat, they moved him behind cover to render aid and allowed other officers to safely clear the home. The suspect was pronounced dead on scene. Once officers cleared the home, the 2 juveniles were located upstairs and were unharmed. Officers located an adult female victim who had been tied up, shackled, and had visible injuries. She was taken to a local hospital for treatment. Detectives obtained a signed search warrant for the home. Another individual was located inside the residence but, unfortunately, was deceased and beyond help. Detectives learned that the male suspect, along with Heidi Carter, murdered the individual who was found deceased inside the residence. After reviewing witness statements, body camera footage, and other video footage, we believe that all officers from the Evansville Police Department, Vandenberg County Sheriff's Office, and Indiana State Police relied on their training and did an exceptional job under extremely stressful circumstances. It was determined that neither Heidi nor Carrie had lived at 1801 Stinson Avenue. Jason said he had invited Heidi into his home as she was living in a motel and needed somewhere to stay. Carrie would come over a lot and the pair were constantly fighting. Jason said he had asked her not to have anyone over because of his children and the issues with Carrie. "I was only trying to help an individual out," he told the police. "Well, I spoke to a detective here at EPD who was the supervisor on scene, as authorities were trying to figure out what was happening at that Stinson Avenue address. Now, he tells me that this was an absolutely wild situation for everyone involved. And as, it goes along, you start to think this is almost like a real-life episode of Dateline. At first, we weren't sure if it was, a valid complaint by the woman. Of course, we want to treat, due to the seriousness of the complaint, treat it as valid, but there's still part of you that thinks, well, maybe that isn't really happening because it seems almost unbelievable. You had officers who were staged all along the front of the home using things such as, police vehicles as barricades and cover. There were some trees out there that officers were behind as well. This is an open doorway right here. They can actually see movement where somebody is kind of going in and out of the doorway. And they are telling him, we see you, come out, show us your hands, show us your hands. They're giving them commands, come out, come out. I mean, it happens very fast. He comes out quickly. There are officers in front of him. He comes out and he doesn't show his hands. He has his hands out in front and he is holding an object out and pointing it. This is a shooter stance. Police say if Hammond would have walked out of the home as officers told him to do, the situation would have ended differently. The suspect is deceased and we can't ask him these type of questions. But when you are surrounded by police officers and you come out with an object that appears to be a gun and you're pointing it like it's a gun, I hate to use the word assume, but I can only assume that that is going to, in somebody's mind, go, this is going to get me shot. He came out, gun drawn, which looked like a gun to me. And when he came out, looked like he was going to start firing. They shot him. With their main suspect, Carrie Hammond, now dead, it was down to Heidi to talk. And after she was in custody, she went through what she said had happened. In her interview, she was frantic, agitated, and emotionally all over the place. 1 minute crying, the next falling asleep when the detective left the room. She said that earlier in the day she had started talking to the female victim on a dating app. They arranged for both her and Timothy to come over to the house. Once there, they all drank and took drugs before having consensual sex. At some point that afternoon, Carrie had come to the house and found the three together. According to Heidi and the other woman, he completely lost it, grabbed a baseball bat and started beating Timothy with it. The female victim, who has not been named, told police that she and Timothy were both restrained by Carrie and Heidi, and duct tape was put over their mouths as well. A tirade of physical and sexual abuse ensued over the next few hours. Timothy's girlfriend said that Carrie had raped her repeatedly and that Heidi was holding a gun to her while she was being attacked, encouraging Carrie to do it. She said that Heidi told the couple that she knew people that could help them dispose of the bodies and she didn't care if they died. With Timothy still trying to break free and escape, Carrie eventually strangled him to death with his belt, before both he and Heidi moved his body into another room and tried to conceal it. Heidi, however, was adamant that she never held the gun inside the house and only had it on her after she walked out the front door before she was arrested, something which Timothy's girlfriend and Cynthia said wasn't true. Heidi claimed she only acted like she was restraining the couple, but didn't actually do anything. "There are a lot of things I should have done different," she said, adding that she had inadvertently helped Carrie by not stopping him. She also admitted to the interviewing officer that she had told the pair she would be able to get rid of their bodies if they died, but she was still maintaining she was just going along with Carrie for her own safety. Given what both she and the female victim were saying to the detectives, Heidi's story just wasn't making sense. Heidi had even left the house temporarily, and instead of running for help, she came back and carried on with Carrie. Heidi Carter was arrested and booked into the Vandenberg County Confinement Center for the following charges: murder, 2 counts of intimidation with a weapon, rape, 2 counts of felony criminal confinement, assisting a criminal, carrying a handgun without a license, and abuse of a corpse. Evansville police now asking for the public's help, looking for possible victims of other crimes who may have been harmed by the suspects in the Stinson Avenue homicide. Carrie Hammond and Heidi Carter are the 2 people police say were responsible for the list of crimes in the Stinson Avenue homicide, and now police are asking any additional victims or anybody with additional information to reach out. Police said that both she and Carrie had long rap sheets, with past arrests including battery, breaking and entering, giving false police statements, theft, disorderly conduct, and criminal mischief. The woman accused in an unusual murder plot in Evansville has her trial date set. Heidi Carter is scheduled to stand trial on June 13th. In 2022, Heidi's trial began, and at the recommendation of her lawyer, she did not testify. The jury watched hours of video, including the entire interrogation of Heidi, after she was taken into custody. That video alone was over 2 hours long. In court, Heidi sat looking at the floor the whole time. Timothy's girlfriend also gave her testimony as well. An Evansville woman accused of rape and confinement has come to a close. 37-year-old Heidi Carter was arrested in October of 2021. Mitch, now that the second day has wrapped up, what's in store for tomorrow? It was another busy day in court as the prosecution is speeding through this trial. Both they and the defense came to rest today after hours of video and testimony. Today alone, we also heard from multiple EPD officers and an Indiana State Police forensic analyst. Tomorrow, we'll hear final arguments and deliberation, so a lot has been said in 2 short days, but I'll go over the bigger points of day 2. This morning, we began with over a half an hour of body cam footage from 4 officers. We also saw footage of officers discovering Ivy's body. While the clip played of them revealing Ivy's corpse wrapped up in blankets, Carter looked down and would not face the jury nor the screen. We followed another body cam as Carter was patted down on scene, revealing the revolver that was in her pants. That same firearm was brought out of evidence and shown to the court today. The jury stayed until a little before 5 to go over all the evidence so far, and come 8:30 tomorrow, they'll get back together to do the same. After that, we'll hear final arguments from the prosecution and the defense, and before things are turned over then to the 14-person jury to decide what the future holds for Heidi Carter. After just 2 days, in November 2022, the state of Indiana rested its case. In December, after 12 hours of deliberations, Heidi Carter was found guilty of just one of the charges, which was possession of a handgun without a permit. The jury couldn't make a decision on her other charges, and the judge declared a mistrial. Developing overnight, an Evansville woman on trial accused of confinement and rape will get a new court date. The jury spent all week listening to the case of 37-year-old Heidi Carter. They did find her guilty of count 5, possession of a handgun without a permit. That's a misdemeanor, but other more serious charges were not decided on and were ruled a mistrial. While the state pushed for a guilty verdict on all counts, the defense says none of this would have happened if not for Hammond. They asked the jury if they were firmly convinced she's guilty. This is a case that I felt very strongly about. The state of Indiana made the decision to prosecute Ms. Carter. What I argued to the jury was for the crimes of another person. And at this point, now that there has been a mistrial declared, it's going to be up to the state of Indiana whether or not they want to continue to pursue this case. Yesterday, the prosecution did say one of Carter's rape charges would be dropped. They will be back in court December 9th to decide on those charges. Heidi Carter is now scheduled to go back on trial in February of 2023. The reality is, it is hard to know the full extent of what happened inside the house on Stinson Avenue back in October 2021. Story 2. This episode is sponsored by Aura, an all-in-one solution to protect your identity, finances, devices, and more. With so many different accounts and devices these days, it's important now more than ever to protect your information and data online. Aura gives you financial fraud and credit protection, allowing you to monitor your credits and even place locks on your credit files to stop any unwanted inquiries into your credit history. They alert you to new inquiries into your credit information, any suspicious bank activity, or if they detect any threats to your identity and accounts. Their parental controls help you to block and filter any websites and apps, set screen time limits, and monitor internet usage for your family. There are numerous different plans available depending on your needs, and they include antivirus software, VPNs, password managers, credit scores, and checking to see if your information and data is being used anywhere or leaked online. It's an all-in-one solution, and with 24/7 support over the phone, you can get help whenever you need it. If you're based in the United States, you can try a no-risk 14-day free trial with Aura today at aura.com/trulycriminal, or by clicking the link in our description box below. Thank you again to Aura for sponsoring today's episode. October 2009. A nationwide alert was issued to try and find the car of a convicted sex offender. He had failed to comply with the conditions of his bail. He had last been seen by police at his home on the 29th of August 2008. When police went to his home on the 6th of January 2009 to talk to him about a traffic incident, he was not there. As part of the parole checks, different officers were to visit him the following month. And again, there was no answer. In September, a nationwide alert was issued to find him. 24 hours after issuing the appeal, on Monday the 26th of October, an arrest was made on the A177 near Sedgefield in England. The car was not insured, and the police car's onboard computer had flagged it. At 5:40 p.m., a 32-year-old man was in custody. During his interview, he told the police they could crush his car. Not long after, this arrest would take a sinister turn when he made a disturbing confession. CCTV at Middlesbrough Police Station captured the moment he told a custody officer what he had done the night before. "I've got it written down here, just don't say anything for the moment. I've got it. When the detention officers visited you, you said, 'I want to speak to someone,' and say, 'I did, right, kill someone that night.' When brought to the desk, you then stated, 'I need to tell them where the body is because it's not been reported yet. They're going to need my forms from my property.' Do you agree that's right what you said? Right, if you could just sign to that on there, please. Fellas, take it back down, we'll get something done." He had given the police several different names, so the police weren't sure of his identity. However, when the truth came out, it would leave people outraged. Ashley Hall was a typical teenage girl. She lived in Warwick Square, Darlington, with her mother and siblings. She had been a brownie and a girl guide, adored animals, and loved to play her music loud. Her bedroom was all pink, and photographs of friends, family, and loved ones covered the walls. She was chatty, friendly, and personable. Her mother, Andrea, described her as her best friend. It had been just the two of them for 11 years, And when Andrea went on to have 3 more daughters, Ashley was like a second mother to them and helped to bring them up. She adored them and the 4 shared a tight bond. After completing her GCSEs, Ashley left her with school and went to Darlington College to study to be a nursery nurse. She was close to her friends and would use the money her mother gave her for helping out to talk to her friends on the phone and the computer. She would text and call them often and use MSN Messenger to stay in touch too. It was on the social networking site Facebook that Ashley saw a photograph of a young man called Peter Cartwright. The pair began speaking and he showered her with kind words and compliments. She was flattered by his attention and agreed to meet him in person. He hadn't shown up for their first meeting, but 2 days later it was rearranged. Cartwright said his father would be there to pick her up. Sunday, October 25, 2009 that evening, Ashley received a text message. "Hi hun, it's Pete's dad. Are you sure you don't mind me picking you up? Pete is really looking forward to seeing you and yes, it's okay for you to stay." Ashley replied, "No, it's fine, I don't mind. I trust him, so I trust you and thank you." She then received another message. "My dad's on his way, babe. He says excuse the state of him, lol. He doesn't have to come in and meet your mom, does he, lol? He'll be a mess probably, lol. Oh, and you wearing some sexy underwear for me?" She replied, "Okay, babe, and no, he doesn't have to, lol. It's okay, haha. What car has he got? And you will have to wait and see, won't you?" Ashley told her mother she was going to stay with one of her friends from college and that her friend's father would pick her up. Her mother made her promise that she would be home by 10:30 a.m. the following day. She said she would, and with that, she left. As the next day rolled around, Ashley still hadn't made contact. Andrea had tried to call her daughter 30 times, but it just kept going to voicemail. Andrea's mother tried to contact her too, but she was also met with silence. They carried on calling her throughout the day. Then at 7 p.m., the phone was finally answered. Andrea could hear people talking in the background, but nobody spoke into the phone. She repeatedly called out her daughter's name, but there was no response from whoever had answered. She rang the phone again, and this time a man picked up. She said, "Who the hell are you?" The man on the other end of the phone asked who she was. Andrea replied, "I want to know who has my daughter's phone." He then said he was a police chief inspector. He explained that a man had been arrested for a driving offense and had been in possession of Ashley's phone. The chief inspector said he would call her back. Andrea said she felt sick, panicked, and confused. Andrea put the call out on Facebook for any information saying, "Ring me immediately if you know where Ashley is." The friend Ashley had said she would be staying with got in touch. She hadn't seen her and Ashley had not stayed at her house. 11:30 p.m., there was a knock on Andrea's front door. It was 2 police officers. They asked her to sit down as they had some terrible news to share with her. They had found a body. The body needed to be formally identified. So Andrea's father went to the morgue to carry out the devastating task. He confirmed it was Ashley Hall. He said, "It was the hardest thing I've had to do in my life. It is something no granddad should have to do." Durham police have formally identified the dead girl as 17-year-old Ashley Hall. They say they believe she may have met her attacker on the internet. The man who led them to her body is still in custody. It's a tragic and quite horrific case, really. And it's come about under very unusual circumstances. In that we've had a man who's been arrested for minor traffic offenses, who then once in custody decides to tell us about the whereabouts of a body. And he takes the police to the scene of that body. The 32-year-old man who has no fixed address but has links to Liverpool and Teesside took the police down a quiet lane just off a busy main road. The scene was immediately cordoned off and a tent placed over the body. Scene of crime officers arrived in the morning to start collecting evidence. The car the man was driving when he was arrested has been examined by experts. The police want to hear from anyone who saw the dark blue Ford Mondeo between 7 p.m. on Sunday and 20 to 6 on Monday evening. She had been raped and her arms and legs had been tied up and tape was put over her face. Her body was then dumped against a fence near Old Stockton Road. The first post-mortem to establish how she had died was inconclusive. The second one revealed she had died from smothering. After her body was found, Ashley's family looked on her computer and found that she had been having conversations with a man they didn't know. It was the man who had been arrested for the traffic offenses. His name was Peter Chapman, and he had a terrifying history of offending. Peter Chapman had been born in January 1977 and was looked after by his grandparents in Stockton. Those who knew him in school said he was strange from a young age. It wasn't long before he was on the radar of police. When he was just 15 years old in 1992, he was investigated over an allegation of sexual assault. In May 1996, he committed 2 horrifying rapes against sex workers in Teesside. The violence had increased, and he had also used a knife in the attacks. He was sentenced to serve 7 years in a young offenders institution. The judge described him as clearly a danger to women. He served half of his sentence before being released and was now a registered sex offender, meaning there were conditions on his freedom. He would later move to Middlesbrough and lived on Martin Road. The attacks would begin again. He used a stolen car with a fake registration plate to pick up a woman before holding her at knife point and sexually assaulting her. 2 days later, he did the same thing and picked up a woman before driving 24 miles to a disused railway track in County Durham. She too was attacked at knife point. This was where Chapman made a mistake. He told his second victim how he had attacked a woman just 2 days before. His victim went to the police and reported him. The investigating officers linked this attack to the one from 2 days prior, and the first victim was able to pick Chapman out of a lineup. In 2001, Peter Chapman was released from prison and moved to Merseyside. Just 1 year later, Cheshire police were investigating an allegation of kidnap and rape that a sex worker had made, and Peter Chapman was arrested again. However, the case would be discontinued. In June, he moved again, this time to the city of Bristol. He would be arrested, but this time for deception offenses. But before long, he was back in custody for another sexual assault. He had been arrested by police in Liverpool on suspicion of the kidnap and rape of a sex worker. He had got her into his car on the agreement of sex for £60. And because he appeared to be friendly, she agreed to go to a flat with him. Detective Inspector Mick Callan said she told police that at first, she didn't feel threatened because of his manner. Once they arrived, the encounter took a terrifying turn. He held her at knife point and kept her tied up for 14 hours, where she was subjected to an appalling series of sexual assaults. He had tied her hands together and taped over her mouth. He used a 12-inch knife to threaten her. After raping her, he told her that he was sorry and that he hadn't meant to hurt her. He would then rape her again. He made her get back into his car and then left her near to where he had picked her up. She went to the police, and based on the description of the flat she was able to give, Peter Chapman was arrested. He was charged, but the case would once again be discontinued. The woman he had attacked was too traumatized to face him in court, and the case collapsed. Peter Chapman would be downgraded to a medium-risk offender when he had previously been considered high-risk. After he continued to miss appointments, he was recalled to prison in 2004 and spent another 15 months behind bars. Upon his release, he enrolled in a computer course. In December 2007, he befriended a single mother in Runcorn who had a young baby and was unaware of his status as a sex offender. He had not complied with the conditions of being a registered sex offender and moved in with the woman and her child. When she found out about his past, she kicked him out. In 2009, a warrant was issued for his arrest after he fled from a hit and run that left a woman with a broken arm. But he was able to evade capture and moved again. After moving to the Thames Valley, he struck up a friendship with another woman. Whilst there, he had a falling out with one of her neighbors. The neighbor's house would later be set on fire. Soon after the fire, Chapman was gone. He also took a stolen laptop with him. He used the woman from Runcorn's details to purchase a car on eBay, and by October, he was back in Teesside. He was living in a roadside hotel. He then started talking to Ashley Hall on Facebook. To avoid her not getting into the car when she saw that it was him and not the person she had been talking to, he devised a plan. Using 2 different phones, he told her that Peter Cartwright's father would be the one to collect her, just down the street from her home. His plan worked. After picking her up, he drove to Thorpe Larches, close to Sedgefield. One of Ashley's friends, Gemma, had been texting her while she was in the car with Chapman. The conversation had been fine, with Gemma saying it didn't feel like anything was wrong. It just felt normal. But they were really late replies. She said Ashley's behavior had been out of character. When we found out she had met this man, it just didn't seem like her at all. It was totally different to anything she had done. He must have made her feel so special for her to go and meet him. Really, really special. Whilst with Chapman, Ashley was subjected to a brutal sexual assault. He then bound her up and put tape across her face. He told the police that he had killed her after an argument had got out of control. When forensics went through his car, they found more incriminating evidence. Her mobile phone, some screwed-up duct tape, and some tape with Ashley's hair stuck to it. They also found a used condom. Durham police would later say that had he not said anything after being arrested for the traffic offense, they likely would have crushed the car. It wasn't just his car that provided clues. His digital footprint also revealed a lot. He had various fake profiles across at least 9 different sites. One fake profile he had set up had nearly 3,000 friends. All of them were female, and the ages ranged from 31 to just 13 years old. His email account showed that on the day he had contacted Ashley, 100 young girls had also accepted his friend request. After adding somebody as a friend, he would then try and get them to use private chat rooms, where the conversations would become sexual and explicit. He had attempted to meet 2 15-year-old girls, and one of them agreed to meet in a B&Q car park in Hartlepool. When she approached and saw him sitting in the car, she ran away. Several days later, he had tried to meet another girl in Stockton, but she didn't turn up. The day after murdering Ashley, Chapman was due to meet another woman, but his registration number was spotted by the ANPR system and he was arrested on the A177. In November, hundreds of people came together for Ashley's funeral at St. Cuthbert's Church. As the bell rang at 3 p.m., Andrea led mourners into the church. There weren't enough seats for everybody and the community was united in its grief. When the service was finished, her coffin was taken to a private cremation service. Her mother said, "I didn't want Ashley to be buried in the cold ground. Her favorite place was home, so I keep her ashes here." In January 2010, Peter Chapman pleaded not guilty to the kidnap, rape, and murder of Ashley Hall. The night before his trial was due to start, Peter Chapman changed his plea to guilty. Andrea had decided to attend court and look Peter Chapman in the eyes. She said, "People say to me, 'How do you feel?' I don't really know. Empty and angry are the words that sum it up best." Prosecutor Graham Reeds QC said, after inventing the fake teenage Peter, he now decided to invent Peter's dad in order to persuade Ashley that it was safe to get into his car. The plan he devised was calculated and wicked, and it worked. At Teesside Crown Court on the 8th of March 2010, Judge Peter Fox sentenced Peter Chapman to life in prison with a minimum term of 35 years for the rape and murder of Ashley Hall. The judge told him he had been a very great danger to women for a considerable time. He said that Chapman had undertaken a significant degree of planning to carry out his appalling crime. He said, "This was an evil scheme very carefully brought, and with considerable detail to trap your victim. For what it's worth, I cannot foresee your release," he said. A convicted sex offender has been jailed for life after admitting the kidnap, rape, and murder of a teenager he met on a social networking site. If you're going to meet someone, tell someone where you're going to meet them. Tell them who you're going to meet, and only meet them in very, very public places. And also, whenever possible, take someone else with you. Them sort of people should be tagged, and they should be kept an eye on all the time. Shouldn't be allowed out into society anyway. Shouldn't be let out whatsoever. And for the people who are supposed to keep an eye on him, they should keep an eye on these sort of people. Not long after his sentence, it was revealed that Peter Chapman had been attacked in HMP Franklin, the Category A prison where he is being held. He suffered multiple cuts to the face after being assaulted, but recovered in the hospital wing of the prison. Following Ashley's death, the Home Secretary Alan Johnson said that lessons needed to be learned from her case. He said that authorities in both the United States and United Kingdom were working to find ways to flag up when a convicted sex offender uses the internet. He said, "What our people in the Child Exploitation and Online Protection Agency do is go online themselves to try and lure these people in. Whether we can get the technology to flag up when they're online is something we need to look at." He also called on the police to answer questions about how Peter Chapman had been monitored. The Independent Police Complaints Commission, commonly referred to as the IPCC, announced that it was going to be investigating how Merseyside police had monitored Peter Chapman after the force had referred themselves to the watchdog. It emerged that 9 months had passed between the police in Merseyside realizing he was no longer there and them issuing a national wanted notice for him in September 2009. This was 1 month before he murdered Ashley. A spokesperson for Merseyside police said he didn't know why the wanted notice didn't go out. The IPCC said that when Chapman moved in May 2005, he came under a different sex offender unit and he should have been visited every 3 months. A period of 9 months would pass between visits. He was visited by one female police officer who had to use her own car due to low staffing levels. She had not received proper training on how to monitor sex offenders, despite repeatedly asking for said training. The unit was described as poorly organized and was the only one in the force that was not a standalone unit. When details of Chapman's car were circulated on the police national computer, following his failure to adhere to the conditions of being a registered sex offender, 3 police forces recorded hits on their ANPR systems between the 23rd and October 26th. IPCC Commissioner Nassim Malik said it is evident from our investigation that this particular sex offender unit was inadequately resourced and as a result, the officer tasked with managing sex offenders in the community had an impossible task. Chapman was not monitored effectively and managed to slip away with terrible consequences. I fully appreciate that irrespective of the failings in monitoring, Chapman may well have enacted his plan anyway. Only 24-hour-a-day monitoring could ensure prevention of such acts. My deepest sympathies go out to Ashley Hall's family for their loss. Their grief can only be compounded by the evident police failings that have been uncovered surrounding the man who murdered Ashley. Andrea repeatedly begged Facebook to remove Ashley's profile. They only did so when police lodged a complaint via the United States Embassy. Following the murder of Ashley Hall, Darlington Council created information packs and software to educate young people about online safety. Darlington Council's cabinet member for children and young people said Ashley has left a lasting legacy. Ashley Hall was a 17-year-old girl with her whole life ahead of her. In the words of her mother, she was loving, honest, caring, and well-liked. Everybody loved her. She was a person who brought light into the lives of others. Story 3. We're in the United Kingdom, in the Midlands city of Leicester, a place with lots of hustle and bustle. It's rich in culture and diversity, with lots of art, sports, history, great schools and colleges. It's home to Leicester City Football Club and the Leicester Tigers. Just outside of the busy city centre sits Lime Road, which was home to 46-year-old Kieran Daudia and her ex-husband, 51-year-old Ashvin. The couple had had an arranged marriage back in India in 1988 and went on to have 2 sons, Vivek and Shivam. Vivek lived and worked in Sheffield and Shivam lived at home as he finished off school. In 2014, after 26 years of marriage, littered with a string of issues, the couple divorced. They agreed to continue living together while they worked on selling their house, and after this they could move on with their lives separately. Kieran had worked for a Next call center for 17 years. Her son said she saw work like a second home and her colleagues were like family. Ashvin often worked long hours, operating machines in a factory. Kieran was described as very intelligent, outgoing, loving fashion and makeup, and was an avid Leicester City fan. Her children said she was always so caring and gentle and definitely the backbone of the family. A few years after Kieran and Ashvin had split, Kieran's sister offered to buy their home. After several months of paperwork, the moving dates were set. The plan was Kieran would stay a while longer and Ashvin would move out on January 16, 2017. On the morning of January 16th, Shivam got up and got ready for school as normal. He usually had breakfast with his mother, but on this day, the house was empty and it seemed that Kieran had left for work early. Kieran arrived back at home a few hours later, just before 2:30. When Shivam returned home at 3:30, he was surprised to see his mum wasn't there. As the cold January day quickly rolled into darkness, worry had started to grow. At about 6:30 p.m. Vivek received a call from his grandmother, asking if he had heard from Kieran. He hadn't and immediately shared the concern, coming over to Leicester from Sheffield as soon as he hung up. It was his birthday the next day, and the family would all be celebrating. His mother wouldn't not be returning his calls. She would be calling him to plan the special day. Shivam used the Find My app to try and track her phone. It pointed toward Mayfield Road, about a 5-minute walk away from their house, but it didn't really show anything. Could well be just showing the route she took to walk home that afternoon. The family collectively decided there was no reason to hang about, and they called 999 and reported her as missing. The police took some details and made a log of it, ready to start looking at it the following day. But before their investigation even really began, at 9 a.m. the next day, they received another call from one of the neighbors, from the nearby Cromer Street. By the bins, near a shared alleyway and backyard, there was a large suitcase which had appeared there overnight. It was very heavy, and the neighbors had decided to look inside. It was the body of a woman. This, coupled with the missing persons reports that had come in the evening before, meant it didn't take long to identify that they had just found Kiran Daudia. They said it was like something out of a horror movie. Kiran had a bin liner over her head, and plastic cable ties securing her hands and ankles, pushing them behind her back. Some torn pieces of latex gloves were also found in the suitcase, and were sent off for testing right away. When police called Vivek to tell him, he was given the painful task of going to identify his mother. After this, detectives sat down with Kiran's family. Shivam and Vivek had some stories to share that pointed the investigation in one direction. And within a day, the full and awful truth about what had happened to Kiran would start to unravel. Kiran's family told police that after Ashwin had been told he needed to leave the house in mid-January, he had acted like it wasn't even happening. He refused to pack or make any movements towards finding another place to live, and this was just the tip of the iceberg of the problems between the pair. Vivek and Shivam said that since they were very young, they had been subjected to torrents of abuse from their father. When Vivek was 13, he said that his father had tried to burn him with an iron and would often hit them with things lying around the house. He would often physically hurt Kiran and hurl verbal abuse at her as well. As the years had gone on, the abuse had become worse, and Vivek and Shivam were forcing themselves in the middle of the pair, in a bid to protect their mother from being hurt. Ashwin soon stopped giving money towards bills, resulting in Kiran working even harder, and he was drinking more than ever, which was adding to the problems. The fact that his ex-wife was allowed to stay in the house and he wasn't, was a huge cause of contention, and Ashwin would often lose his temper over it. Kiran had also recently signed up to a dating app, telling everybody the divorce was long over, and she was excited to move on and meet someone new. When she signed up, Shivam recalled her laughing and saying to him, "What if he ends up killing me?" As Shivam gave the police a rundown of what had happened on January 16th, it became more and more obvious that Ashwin was the only person that showed enough hatred towards Kiran to do something like that to her. Shivam said the second he came home, and he realized his mother wasn't there and wasn't answering her phone, he turned to his father and said, "What have you done? I know you've done something." He said that Ashwin could not give him a straight answer, he just stared at him and shrugged. Kiran had been found so close to her home that it made the police's job a lot easier when it came to looking at the cameras around the streets. At 6:19 p.m. on January 16th, 2 cameras on neighboring streets picked up some very sinister footage. The suitcase that Kiran had been forced into was seen being dragged through the streets, and although he had tried to conceal his face, police determined the person hauling it along was Ashwin Daudia. 2 days after she was found, Ashwin was placed under arrest, and police began to piece together exactly what had happened. Within minutes of her walking through the door that afternoon, an argument had broken out. Ashwin told police that Kiran had started shouting at him because he hadn't packed anything, and he was due to leave that day. The argument soon became physical, and Ashwin said he had lost control. He hit Kiran over the head several times, before strangling her with her own scarf. After this, he forced her into the suitcase and dragged it outside. He then cleaned up the blood and waited for Shivam to get home at 3:30. As Shivam was out and about, frantically trying to find his mother, just after 6 p.m., Ashwin quickly pulled the suitcase back out onto the street, before hurrying home half an hour later. Ashwin disposed of Kiran's phone, which was later found on the roof of a nearby business, and he also put all cleaning materials and her bloody clothes into another suitcase. which has never been found. After he was charged with murder, testing on the latex gloves came back, and the DNA on them, as they expected, belonged to Ashvin. Almost a year after Kiran Daudia was found, the trial of her ex-husband began at Leicester Crown Court. Vivek and Shivam both testified, painting an unhappy and rage-filled home, caused solely by their father, they said. Ashvin's lawyer asked Vivek, "Did you like him?" "Not the abusive parts," he said. His lawyer said, "Can you tell me something nice he did?" Vivek replied, "No." "You can't think of one thing in your whole life?" she asked. "Can't," he said. The prosecution said that when you put all the evidence together, the CCTV, the DNA evidence from inside the latex gloves found in the suitcase, and his prior history of abuse, you can be sure that the defendant's claim of not having anything to do with and not knowing anything about Kiran's death are a pack of lies. What can be the intention when one person strangles another? The answer is obvious. The defense team were pushing for a manslaughter conviction, as Ashvin was claiming it was all self-defense. He said he was being bullied by the rest of the family, including his sons, and was forced to defend himself when Kiran came home and attacked him. The prosecution said to him, "You strangled her until she was dead." Ashvin replied, "My hand. Yes, I pressed her neck, then I wrapped the scarf around. I didn't know what was happening. I was just holding her." Kiran's family all said this was nonsense, and not in Kiran's nature. She would have never instigated anything, and lived in a state of fear most of the time. After just a couple of hours of deliberations, the jury found him guilty of murder, and Ashvin Daudia was handed a life sentence with a minimum term of 18 years behind bars. The judge did not hold back in his sentencing remarks. He said Ashvin was far less intelligent than Kiran and was unable to cover his tracks. He said, "In my judgment, you were arrogant, bullying, and bent upon maintaining control. In short, I'm quite satisfied the course of destruction of your family was a course charted by you. Your selfish pride fueled your anger." She was barely over 5 feet tall and of slight build. She was injured and bleeding. You must have overpowered her easily and had her at your mercy. Of mercy you showed none. The judge also praised Vivek and Shivam, calling them fine young men of whom any parent would be proud. Shivam said he can't remember his last moments with his mother. He said he knew he would have spoken to her before he went to bed, but he couldn't remember what they had said to each other, and this causes him pain every day. He also wonders what might have happened to him if he had come home any earlier and seen what his father was doing. Vivek agreed and said, "I now find myself imagining my brother coming home earlier than expected that day. He would have seen our mum being murdered, and I have no doubt that he would have been killed too." This is the following statement. Kiran was full of life, with a vibrant personality, a loving, caring mother, with a very thoughtful daughter, sister, and aunt. Her friendly and charismatic nature meant she had many friends. She was simply beautiful and loved having photographs taken. She was the backbone of the family, very kind, generous, and angelic. We as a family cannot even begin to describe the loss and emptiness in our heart. Her perpetual smile will be missed every day of our lives by everyone who knew her. Kiran had lots of dreams and aspirations, which were untimely taken away by this demonic act. We cannot thank enough for the support given to us throughout this difficult time, and we would like to especially thank East Midlands Special Operations Major Crime Unit, including Senior Investigating Officer D.I. Simon Shutterworth, Officer in the case D.S. Mark Wesley, and D.C. Jenny Tuffson, our Family Liaison Officer, Leicestershire Police, and the Crown Prosecution Service. They have all worked tirelessly to bring this evil person to justice. He showed no remorse in coming forward and taking responsibility for his barbaric actions. We would also like to thank Victim Support, Next Directory, and our own employees, Queen Elizabeth College, Sri Hindu Temple, Asian Funeral Service, our family, friends, neighbors, and the public for their continuous support throughout this ordeal. We would also like to thank all of those who provided CCTV to the inquiry. Although today there has been justice for Kiran, this does not take away our heartache. Her energy will resonate with us forever. We will be living this sentence for the rest of our lives. Vivek said, "Whilst we can never get our mother back, her strength will live on through us. Every morning I still go on my phone and I text Mum good morning, as I did every day before. It's the only normal thing that I'm holding on to. Story 4. Friday, the 20th of February, 2015. 4 p.m. A 999 call was made. Ladies and gentlemen, how can I help? It appears my daughter has gone missing. No one has seen her, no? No. We phoned around the family. All her friends have contacted us. I'm asking where she is and none of them know. What's your name? Rebecca Watts. 16-year-old Rebecca Watts, known to most as Becky, had last been seen by her family the previous morning. She had left her home in Crown Hill, Bristol, with her tablet, phone, and laptop. She had not taken anything else or spare clothes with her. She hadn't told anybody where she was going, and she wasn't responding to text messages and calls. This was completely out of character for Becky. She had never behaved this way or stayed out too late. She had spoken with her friend the day before, who said she had been her normal self and nothing seemed unusual or off about her demeanor. There was nothing to indicate that she had planned to run away. Becky had been born on the 3rd of June, 1998, to parents Darren and Tanya. Before she was born, her parents had split up and her early life was spent with her mother Tanya. She would later be taken into care due to concerns of neglect, but not long after, she and her brother Dan started living with their father. She was described as burly and feisty, with a wicked sense of humor, feeling confident to come out of her shell around those she knew. At school she was more quiet and shy, but her teachers said she was incredibly caring, kind, and had a huge heart. She had a small but very close-knit circle of friends whom she adored and they adored her in return. Darren would later begin a relationship with a woman called Angie, who herself was a parent to a son called Nathan. When Darren and Angie married in 2013, Nathan had served as best man and Becky as a bridesmaid, along with Nathan's girlfriend, Shauna. Less than 2 years after their wedding day, their world had been turned upside down and Becky was now missing. After calling 999, Becky's father made a desperate plea on Facebook, saying, "Please, if anyone has seen or heard from my daughter, just let me know she is safe." She went missing Thursday 19th at 11:15 a.m. to meet her boyfriend and never arrived. So he came here looking for her. She hasn't been seen since by any of her friends. Police have now started a search. I'm really scared now. I want her home. Detective Chief Inspector Richard O'Cone said that what was alarming to police was that her social media had not been used. She was regularly in contact with her friendship group, but there had been no communication from her. The story was quickly picked up by the national media. Becky Watts, who's 16, was last seen at her Bristol home. It's the last point of reference that we can actually place her at, and clearly we're trying to look at what happened after she left. It's 5 days since Becky left her home in the St. George area of Bristol with just her laptop and a phone. Police say nobody has heard from her since then. Friends, family, the people that are really dearest to her, that I would expect to have regular contact with, at least one of those people, we've had no contact with her, so we really are very concerned about her well-being. Police have searched open ground close to Becky's home, but say there have been no significant finds or breakthroughs. 5 days on, detectives and the schoolgirl's family are mystified by her sudden disappearance. Becky Watts at home in Bristol before she disappeared. The 16-year-old is described by her family as quiet and shy. She's a typical teenage girl. Lots of selfies, music, fashion. Becky's father and stepmother told me today that her disappearance is completely out of character, and they are desperate for news. Bex, if you can see this, get in contact. And if anyone out there knows something, just tell us. Just bring her home safe. If you've got her, then put her somewhere we can find her. We want her home. Please. She's not in trouble. She's just wanted here. We just want her back. That's all we want. The following day, on Wednesday the 25th of February, her family was asked to leave the home so that a search could be done. But there was still no sign of her. Searches were also being undertaken by 6 teams in various locations, including an area of woodland and 3 houses. The College of Policing and National Crime Agency were drafted in to help, and a helicopter was deployed to help search from the air. The nature reserve at Troopers Hill and a local lake were searched as well, but she was nowhere to be found. The The hashtag #FindBecky was circulating around social media, and police took to Twitter to get the news out there about her disappearance. The investigating team needed to talk to those closest to Becky to try and ascertain her last known movements and find out any more information that was relevant. They were trying to build a picture of exactly who Becky was, hoping that the answers to their questions could be found. They spoke to Becky's stepmother, Angie. Shona heard the door go, so she was assuming it was Becky going out. Yep, so I'm assuming it was Becky going out. I think no one saw her go, but just heard the door go and this option that Becky had left. Yep. As their inquiries continued, they found that the last people who had seen Becky had been her stepbrother Nathan Matthews and his girlfriend Shona Hoare. They had initially been hard to pin down for an interview, but the officers were eventually able to get in touch with them and ask them to come to the station. Shona gave her accounts of what had happened on the day Becky had last been seen. I think we got there about 11-ish, heard music upstairs. Assuming Becky had been in then, I went into the kitchen to get a cigarette. Went to go outside to have a cigarette. My daughter started whinging because she wanted to come out with me, so I took her down to the garden to help feed the rabbit while I had a cigarette. Probably was about 15-20 minutes. Then we came back up. Went into the kitchen to get a drink. I think I was washing my hands. Then I heard the front door slam. I think it wasn't until a lot later on that Angie asked me if Becky had gone out. I said, yeah, I heard the door go. She must have gone out earlier. Washing my hands, I think. I heard the door slam. Front door. Again, I didn't look at the time or think anything of it, so I didn't really feel like, oh, what was that? It was just the door. Becky would have gone out. I've accidentally got this in the wrong order here. Let me just go back slightly then, if I could. The door slamming then. You've got to go from the kitchen through to the living room. How far away from that front door would you have been? But you've got the front door, the living room, and about halfway up the hallway is the kitchen. So I would have been at the sink. So a distance of reasonable amount, I'd say. Okay. Immediately before the sound of the door slamming, what could you hear then? I think it was just CB music, to be honest. I was kind of more, trying to make sure I had my vitamins back and getting my drink. Yeah. No, I heard stomping down the stairs. That's what made me think that Becky had left in a mood. So I said to Angie because it was the door slam, but I wasn't sure if that was the wind. I took it because there was quite a stomp, stomp, stomp down the stairs. I assumed she was in a bit of one of her tantrums. Yeah. Nathan gave the same account about hearing the door slam. Are you thinking that's the front door that slammed? Yeah. Yeah, okay. And who did you think that was then? Becky. I think what we're doing, so I'll probably wrap the interview up. We've been talking for 2 hours, it's quite a long time. My back's killing me. I know. Several things stood out to investigators. Shauna appeared to be giggly and rather upbeat, and Nathan came across as unconcerned. Another thing that was unusual was just how much their stories aligned. Detective Chief Inspector Richard Okohen said that most people who witness or experience the same events may give accounts that have incorrect details or don't slot together neatly. He said that in this instance, the fact that their stories were so similar indicated they had spoken to each other beforehand and colluded to make sure their stories matched. The search for Becky Watts continued today. Family and friends scouring the parkland and woods near her Bristol home, hopeful they will find the 16-year-old safe and well. Volunteers came out in droves to assist in the searches. Posters were put up, and people were determined they were not going to stop looking until she was found. It had now been 9 days since Becky had last been seen. The police brought the major crime unit on board to assist in the investigation and turn their efforts back to Becky's house. They went in with the forensics unit to see if the house held any clues as to where she could be. They made a sinister discovery. Faint spots of blood were found on the doorframe of Becky's bedroom. Fingerprints were found in the blood too. While tests were being carried out, they asked her stepbrother Nathan and his girlfriend Shauna to come back in for a second round of interviews. Has Nathan had any concerns about speaking to us? Not that he's told me, no. If he does, I wouldn't know then. How is he finding it? He's found it quite hard, actually. Again, he's kind of more thinking, my God, if it was... Or again, knowing how hard it would be for his mom at the moment. Because Becky was almost like a daughter to her. And over the weekend, have either you or Nathan been involved in searching for Becky? No, I wasn't aware they were doing a search. I didn't realize until I think it was yesterday. I went on my Facebook and obviously there was news articles and pictures popped up about that they did this search. Shauna's statement that Nathan was finding the situation difficult varied from his. I didn't particularly talk to her, but obviously I didn't particularly like her. And obviously what annoys me is the way she speaks to my mum sometimes. She'd be kind of rude or whatever, which I don't think is an actual specific thing. Despite the feelings of officers, they didn't have enough to hold him in custody. But this would soon all change. The results had come back from the fingerprint that had been found in the blood on Becky's doorframe. It belonged to her stepbrother, Nathan Matthews. It would be several more hours before the results would be in on who the blood belonged to. They decided that if it came back as being Becky's blood, they would make an arrest straight away on suspicion of kidnap. And their worst fears were soon realized. The blood belonged to Becky. Saturday, February 28, 2015, Nathan Matthews and Shauna Hall were taken into custody at a house in Bristol. The reason I've come here is to make an arrest of yourself, okay? And what I'm going to do is explain everything here and now, okay? Put your hands like that for me. Nathan was 10 years older than Becky and had known her since she was 2 years old, when his mother started dating Darren. Darren's relationship with Nathan had been quite strained. Nathan didn't want anybody interfering with his and his mother's lives. Becky's brother, Dan, got along with Nathan. They would often play video games and spend time in each other's company. But Nathan didn't interact much with Becky. He also didn't live in the family home. He instead lived close by with his grandmother, but would often go over to see his mother and stepfamily. When Nathan was 19 years old, he had come to the house with 4 young girls in the back of his car, none of them appearing to be older than 12. Darren refused to let him bring them inside and told Nathan to take them all home immediately. In her teens, Becky had struggled with an eating disorder, and whilst her family were deeply concerned, Nathan flippantly dismissed her struggles, saying she was doing it for attention. She had become weaker and would also faint, but Nathan still said this was all for attention. After a year, Becky had made it through and recovered from her illness. In 2008, Nathan Matthews was now 21 years old and brought home his new girlfriend, Shauna Hoare. He had told his family she was 19 years old, but she wasn't. She was actually 15. Darren knew he was lying and told him to take Shauna home. Darren had fought hard to get his children out of the care of social services, and he was not going to jeopardize their stability in any way. Nathan and Shauna stayed together, however, and went on to have a daughter. Darren initially didn't like Shauna, saying there was something about her that he couldn't put his finger on. After they were arrested, they were taken to the police station to be questioned again. After allowing Nathan to talk freely, building his confidence in answering their questions, they changed strategy and questioned him in a more direct way. You were at the address at the time that Rebecca or Becky, I think most people know her as Becky, yeah, or Bex. Yeah, okay. Do you know her as Becky or Bex? I usually call her Bex. What we're most interested in is finding Becky. Yeah, that's what the police want to do. Yeah. They were also talking to Shauna about her version of events. Everything seemed normal. Nothing seemed wrong. Nothing, it all seemed kind of the same as it would any other day. Have you got any concerns or suspicions that Nathan or any other member of your family or extended family might be responsible for her disappearance? No. Anything that happened that could be significant in the disappearance of Rebecca? No. You're absolutely sure? Yes. I know you've got something to tell us. I can see it in your face. I was just making sure there was nothing like a weird, significant thing that I hadn't thought of. I don't know. A forensics team was then sent to Shauna and Nathan's home. The house was in disarray. Every room was filled with items, clutter, and mess. As the search moved throughout the property, one part of the upstairs floor immediately stood out. Going into the bathroom, the left-hand side of the room was much the same as the rest of the property. But the bathtub was spotless. It was shiny and extremely clean, and this meant it didn't fit in with the rest of the home. Police have been given more time to question 2 people in connection with the disappearance of 16-year-old Becky Watts. As the questioning continued, the officers decided not to tell either of them what the latest developments were or what evidence they now had. Over the next 2 days, the forensics team continued to search the house that Nathan and Shauna lived in, and it was an incredibly difficult task, given the state of the property. Then, finally, 2 small pieces of paper would give them the lead they had been searching for. 2 receipts for the DIY and hardware store B&Q showed that on Friday, the same day Becky had been reported missing, an electric circular saw, goggles, gloves, and a mask had been purchased. CCTV from the store confirmed that Nathan had been the one to buy the items. Nathan Matthews and Shauna Hall were rearrested, this time on suspicion of the murder of Becky Watts. Following this, the police had to break the devastating news to her family. This was now a murder investigation, and they suspected that Nathan and Shauna were responsible. Becky's father Darren said that it was in that moment his world began to fold in on itself. Before long, flowers were being laid in tribute to Becky as news started to spread. Close to the family home was St. Ambrose Church. A book of remembrance was put out, and the church was open until nighttime for people to light candles for her. Adding to the tragedy, she had been murdered on her brother Dan's 20th birthday. The interviewing officers did not disclose that they had found the receipts. They continued to raise the pressure by saying that the house they had lived in had been forensically searched, leaving the accused guessing as to what exactly had been found. Tuesday, the 3rd of March, 2015. At 10:26 p.m., a statement was given to the police from Nathan via his lawyer. Nathan Matthews refused to listen to it and stuck his fingers in his ears to drown out the sound of his statement being read out. It read as follows: I, Nathan Charles Matthews, accept that I am responsible for the death of Rebecca Watts. On the 19th of February 2015, I attended Crown Hill, St. George, Bristol with my girlfriend, Shauna Hoare. In my car, I had a large bag, stun device, handcuffs, tape, and a mask. I had developed an idea to scare Rebecca by kidnapping her. I wanted to scare her and teach her a lesson. I believed that she was selfish and her behavior towards my mother was a risk to her health. A few minutes after arriving, Shauna said she wanted a cigarette and went into the garden. I went to the boot of my car, took out a bag that contained the items, then went upstairs to the landing before knocking on Rebecca's door. She replied, "What or hello?" And I said, "Can I see you a minute?" I cannot be sure which order things happened, but I used the items to subdue Rebecca. During the short struggle, my mask slipped and Rebecca was able to see my face. This caused me to panic, and I strangled her while she was partially in the bag. The horrifying details did not stop there. After murdering Becky, he had used the saw he had purchased from B&Q to dismember her. She had been dismembered in the bathtub, which had then been cleaned, showing that the officers who were being concerned with how out of place the bath had looked had been absolutely right. As a result of new information received late last night, we attended at a house at Barton Court in the Barton Hill area of Bristol. The information suggested that Becky's body had been cut up, and a search at the new location resulted in the discovery of body parts. Although formal identification procedures have not yet been completed, we have made Becky's family aware of this discovery. As a result of this latest development, a further 3 men and 2 women have been arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. They remain in police custody at this time, as do the man and woman arrested on suspicion of Becky's murder. This is devastating news for Becky's family and friends, and our thoughts are with them. We will continue to offer every support we can to them during this terrible ordeal. After 12 days of hunting for Becky Watts, a private ambulance leaves the scene of a grim discovery. The find, in a garden and terraced home on a small estate in Bristol, was made by detectives last night. It was the outcome the teenager's family had prepared themselves for and feared most. The occupants of the house where her body was found were arrested for assisting an offender. They were adamant they had no idea what was inside the bags. They would later plead guilty to the charge. 2 other people would also be acquitted of the same charge. The shed had been searched by Detective Sergeant John Dowding, who had found several suitcases and bags. The body parts had been wrapped in plastic bags and cling film, and cat litter had been used in an attempt to soak up the blood. Salt crystals had also been added to hide the smell. The pathology report showed that Becky had fought for her life with absolutely everything she had. She had sustained more than 40 injuries and had most likely died from suffocation, with a hand covering her nose and mouth. She was then stabbed 15 times post-mortem. Becky had to be identified using DNA. The search for Becky Watts had been one of the biggest investigations undertaken by Avon and Somerset police, and for the officers who had worked tirelessly to try and find Becky and bring her home, this was a devastating end. Even though Nathan Matthews had provided the police with an account, they wanted to delve deeper and ascertain if this was the whole truth. They also wanted to know if his girlfriend Shauna Hoare had played a bigger role than had been suggested. When they interviewed Shauna, she was adamant that the first she had learned of Nathan being responsible had been the day before, when he had made his prepared statement. "What's your knowledge of him killing Becky?" "I found out yesterday morning." "You found out yesterday morning. Prior to that, I had no idea that he had any involvement in anything at all." "How do we know you weren't involved in the killing of Becky?" "Because there would be no proof. I haven't touched anything or been anywhere near her, alive or dead." The horrifying account of what exactly had happened would finally come out. Thursday, February 19th, 2015, Becky arrives home after spending the night at a friend's. At 10:50 a.m., Shauna and Nathan drive to Becky's home. After stopping at a Tesco's to buy some batteries, they know she will be in the house by herself, as Angie has a hospital appointment. Nathan normally parks on the road, but on this occasion he reverses the car into the drive, with the boot facing the front door. 11:03 a.m. Becky sends her last text message. It is to her boyfriend, saying she is listening to music. She then doesn't respond to his messages. Becky is attacked. She is suffocated and her body is put into the boot of the car. 12:45 p.m. Angie returns home. Nathan and Shauna act like nothing has happened. 5 p.m. Becky's boyfriend arrives at the house, concerned that his messages are not getting a response from Becky. Shauna answers the door and pretends to look in Becky's room to see if she is there, and her boyfriend speaks to Darren and Angie. Angie agrees that it is unusual that she isn't responding. 7 p.m. After spending the day with the family, and with Becky's body still in the boot of the car outside, Shauna and Nathan drive home. After arriving at the house, they take her body inside and she is dismembered in the bathtub. They then order a pizza and some Chinese food. Nathan Matthews then fakes a phone call from a friend, pretending they need his help. He leaves and goes to B&Q. Friday, February 20th at 12:20 p.m., Nathan Matthews heads to a shop and purchases 2 bottles of drain cleaner. He then goes to B&Q and buys the gloves, masks, goggles, and saw. At 3:10 p.m., Shauna sends him a message saying, "What time you finish work? LOL." 50 minutes later, at 4 p.m., the 999 call is made and Becky is reported missing. Shauna also shares Darren's Facebook post begging for his daughter to come home. At 6:35 p.m., the police go to Becky's home and speak with Darren, Angie, Nathan, and Shauna. Nathan and Shauna say they heard her leave the house the morning before. By 9 p.m., the pair have returned home and they watch a YouTube video called "Do You Want to Hide a Body?" On the February 21st, the pair visit an Asda store and purchase bin bags, gloves, rubble sacks, cling film, and bleach. The following day, they go to a 99p store, Anna Wilco's, and purchase a sponge, more rubble sacks, and tape before going to Sainsbury's to buy cling film. On the February 23rd, the police go to their house in a bid to speak to them, but they are met with silence and nobody opens the door. At 4:38 p.m., a phone belonging to the couple is used to search find Becky Watts on Google, and just 2 minutes later Shauna rings, her estranged mother, someone she hadn't spoken to for 4 years, to arrange to go to her house that evening. On the February 24th at 2:19 a.m., CCTV captures a white van driving from Cotton Mill Lane to where Becky's body was found. Her body parts are believed to be in the back of the van. What was the question again? About the idea that you got and you said it might have been something on TV or you had a dream. I came up with the idea to scare her because to try and basically make her more appreciative of life, so she'd be more appreciative for other people. She'd be grateful that, she wasn't harmed or anything like that, because obviously she'd leave things out on the floor of my mom to trip over and obviously would talk to her like say nasty comments and talk to her like dirt on the floor. So I thought if I was, able to scare her and obviously her not be harmed and obviously be released, obviously when she got back she obviously would have been scared and more appreciative of things. So tell me what you thought you were going to do. Obviously stick her in the suitcase, obviously put tape around her mouth so she wouldn't make any noise. The plan was obviously once I got her in the car to make up some up to say to Shauna after I had to leave, like to help someone or do something for some up. I was thinking of like a wooded area or whatever to obviously take her back out, obviously still have the mask on and obviously like scare her and say something along the lines of start treating people better, not being a bitch or self-centered, and then like make a threat of or this could happen again or worse or something like that. I hadn't figured out exactly how to obviously walk away after without obviously if she tried to follow. I'm assuming she wouldn't have followed because out of fear she wouldn't have followed someone who just obviously has done that and obviously would have come back, but I would have obviously chucked away everything first and then come back and obviously would have acted as normal had I come back to my mum's. Obviously acted as normal. The gravity of what it was he had done appeared to be dawning on him whilst he was giving this account. Shauna was still being interviewed. I don't know where he would have hit her, so to speak. I suppose there's no reason that you should or shouldn't believe me. I can just obviously tell you that I genuinely had no idea, and yeah, I didn't always like Becky, but she was a nice enough girl. She was so young and effectively got a little girl herself and carrying his unborn children. I don't understand how he could have done it to us. After 96 hours of interviews, Nathan Matthews was charged with the murder of his stepsister. They still didn't have enough to charge Shauna with murder, so she was instead charged with perverting the course of justice, and the police continued to build their case against her over the following 8 weeks. They continued to look into every aspect of their lives, including phone records, and their computers were also looked at too. It would be in one of Shauna's mobile phones that the key to unlock the case would be found. A series of messages had been deleted, but the officers were able to recover them. Nathan Matthews and Shauna Hoare had talked about abducting a young woman and hiding her in the attic. Internet searches had also been made for pornographic material involving people around Becky's age. So the first message is 9/12, 2014, timed at 12:48, and it says to Shauna, and it says, "Fuck you. Bring me back 2 pretty schoolgirls." Then D1, I think that says, "Tell me about that text." Message. Next message is December 9th, 2014 at 18:14. It says, "From Shauna, just went to Cosmeters and saw a very, in big caps, pretty petite girl, almost knocked her out to bring her home, lol, and there's cosas and zeros. Shauna, what can you tell me about that?" No comment. Am I right in thinking that this girl was similar to Becky's age? No comment, but once again forensics would show the truth. A bag containing some of the dismembered body parts had Shauna's DNA on it, and so did one of the masks. On the 22nd of June, Shauna Hoare was charged with the murder of Becky Watts. Becky's funeral was held at St. Ambrose Church on the 17th of April. The church service was open to the public, but her burial was private. Mourners lined the streets as her coffin was brought past on a horse-drawn carriage. A white dove was also released as her coffin was brought out. On the 6th of October, 2015, the trial of Nathan Matthews and Shauna Hoare began at Bristol Crown Court. Becky's family sat stunned as they heard for the first time that 2 years prior to her death, Becky had told one of her friends that Nathan had explained to her in graphic detail how he had planned to murder her. She hadn't told this to her family. He had also been in the Territorial Army after being a cadet, and those who had known him during his time in the TA also gave evidence during his trial. Members of the Territorial Army gave evidence in court and gave a glimpse into a man with few acquaintances and even fewer friends. He had a cheeky confidence, said his former cadet instructor, but by the time he joined the Territorial Army, his temper was beginning to show. One witness said he would sometimes snap, sometimes throw things in frustration. The courtroom sat horrified as details emerged of how Nathan and Shauna held a shared sexual interest in teenage girls. Prosecutor William Mosley QC said in addition to their apparent dislike of Rebecca Watts, there is good reason to believe that there was also a sexual motive behind the scheme arising from a shared and natural interest in attractive teenage females. Shauna told the court that she was completely innocent and that she was actually scared of her boyfriend. The prosecution fired back, saying that they had acted as a team. Shauna's estranged mother also testified at the trial about Shauna suddenly wanting to talk to her after Becky had been killed. She said, "I was joking. And I said, I know why you're at my house all the time. You're running away from the police because you've kidnapped Becky." It was now time for the jury to deliberate, and before long the verdict was in, and it was unanimous. Very good afternoon to you, and welcome to BBC News. The stepbrother of the schoolgirl Becky Watts has been found guilty of her murder. 28-year-old Nathan Matthews suffocated 16-year-old Becky while trying to kidnap her from her home in Bristol in February. Her dismembered body was found in a garden shed. His girlfriend Shauna Hall was acquitted of murder today, but found guilty of manslaughter after just 3 hours of deliberations. Shauna Hall was found guilty of the kidnap and manslaughter of Becky Watts. Nathan Matthews was found guilty of the kidnap and murder of Becky Watts. The jury did not believe them. It took them just 3 hours to decide the pair had conspired to kidnap 16-year-old Becky Watts and that they killed her in a sexually motivated attack. Finally, justice has been done for our beautiful Becky after hearing weeks of harrowing evidence about how the schoolgirl was killed. Her family gave their reactions to today's verdicts. Now the formalities have been concluded. We can begin the process of grieving properly and rebuilding our lives that could never ever be the same. Listening. Becky's dad Darren and his wife Angie, they now know that his daughter was murdered by her son Shauna. Hall was sentenced to 17 years in prison. Nathan Matthews was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 33 years. When he was led away to begin his sentence, he couldn't look his family in the eye and instead stared at the floor. Today has brought to a conclusion 6 weeks of sometimes harrowing evidence. Obviously, in terms of my team, it's been 7 or 8 months now of investigation. It's taken an awfully long time. It's been extremely complex. I think certainly in respect to the evidence, it's been very disturbing at times, disturbing too for the judge, who had tears in his eyes as he paid tribute to Becky's family. The judge is a human being, and as we've already described, the evidence is extremely difficult to listen to in places. In a statement, her mother Tanya Watts said, "My beautiful, kind, funny, loving, loyal, feisty, creative daughter has been murdered. Every day has been a living nightmare. It's like the worst of all horror movies. But this is real. This is my child. She was only 16. How am I meant to cope with that?" Now as her family try to rebuild their lives, Nathan Matthews will be in his 60s before he'll be considered for release, but the reality is the judge said that may never happen. In June 2016, both Nathan Matthews and Shauna Hoare lost their appeals against their convictions following her death. A serious case review was commissioned by the Bristol Safeguarding Children Board. It concluded that her murder couldn't have been predicted or prevented. The report said there had not been enough attention paid to Becky's wider family, which included her stepbrother and his girlfriend. It said that Becky's sometimes challenging behavior and her anxiety was a result of the bullying she was enduring from Matthews. Darren would go on to write a book about his daughter titled Becky, The Heartbreaking Story of Becky Watts. He would later say in an interview, "If they were going to hang him, I would pull the lever so no one else would have to carry the guilt." The stress of what had happened to his daughter had caused him to lose 4 stone or 56 pounds. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't eat, and he was barely able to keep water down in spite of all they had been through and the horrifying events that had devastated their family. Darren and Angie's marriage survived, and they remained committed to one another. "My love for her is immense. It really is. It's unwavering, and I've lost a couple of members of the family because I won't turn on her. I will never desert her. Never. If this doesn't break us up, then nothing's going to." The way the community had come together to help and support the family had been nothing short of incredible, with many lending a hand where they could and doing their best to help. A balloon launch was organized to remember Becky, to show her family she would never be forgotten. A march followed, which brought the center of Bristol to a virtual standstill. Minutes silence were held at football matches for her family. The attention was hard but made them feel less alone. Just a few weeks ago, a baby apple tree was planted for Becky in this local park, a symbol of growth and hope. What I thought you saw right from the beginning was a coming together of this community with a genuine concern and wanting to support the family in any way they could. The story of Becky Watts is both horrifying and heartbreaking. She is perhaps best summed up by the words of her family. "She was like a tornado, hurricane, and sunbeam all at once. She came into your life and made you feel alive." Story 5. I'm convinced that the person either lives in the area, has got connections in the area, or has lived in the area in the past. And I'm equally convinced that somebody in that local community knows who this person is, or suspects who they are, and I would simply say to that person, can you honestly live with Claire Tiltman's murder on your conscience? And can you live with the thought that this person may well strike again? Today's case takes us to Dartford in the UK, and back to a cold, damp evening, the 18th of January 1993. Michael Godfrey and his colleague Ron were driving down the London road in Greenhithe. Michael saw someone at the side of the road, someone who appeared to be on their knees, gasping for air, and clearly in distress. He swiftly pulled over, got out of the car, and ran over to see what was going on. The person was a young girl. Ron shot off quickly to a nearby pub to ring 999 for help, while Michael stayed with her. Michael believed initially that she had maybe been hit by a car, and, concerned for any spinal damage, he checked her back, but couldn't feel anything. He laid her down on the floor, and as he did, he saw blood coming out of her mouth and covering her front. Within a minute, she had stopped breathing, and Michael was performing CPR. An ambulance soon arrived and took over as Michael stayed with her and held her hand. As they cut her vest open, they saw the horrific injuries she had sustained. This hadn't been a car accident or a hit and run. This was a savage and brutal knife attack. It soon became clear to the paramedics that there was nothing more they could do. At 7 p.m., just 4 days after her 16th birthday, Claire Tiltman was pronounced dead. She had suffered multiple stab wounds, some of which were 15 centimeters deep. Operation Artist was soon launched, and the hunt for Claire's killer was on. As with most communities, news of the murder was spreading quickly. Those in Claire's year at school were on different timetables due to their mock GCSE exams, so people would be in school at different times. As a pupil, Joanne sat and listened to the radio in school. She heard that a young girl had been murdered in Greenhithe. The head teacher heard that a 16-year-old named Claire had been killed, but didn't know anything else. They then had confirmation that it was one of their students, 16-year-old Claire Tiltman. The head teacher quickly entered the classroom and switched the radio off. Joanne knew that this was obviously bad news. Their year head and a police officer then came in and broke the news. Their head of year was visibly extremely emotional and struggled to even say what had happened. Their classmate and friend, Claire, had been murdered. Claire was described by Joanne as a shining star that people were immediately drawn to. Known as Tilt to her friends, she had recently completed her GCSE mock exams and had big dreams of becoming a firefighter one day, even volunteering with the fire service as part of her Duke of Edinburgh award. She was extremely popular and had a big circle of friends. Feisty and loyal, with a great sense of humor, she loved nothing more than spending her time dancing to the music of her favorite bands like In Excess and Queen. She was an only child and extremely close to her parents, Cliff and Linda. They adored their daughter and she idolized them. On the 18th of January 1993, Claire had left her home on Woodward Terrace and headed down the London Road towards Greenhithe. She was going to her friend Victoria's house and the pair were going to talk about different college options they had for when their GCSEs were over. She had popped into the local off license to buy some cigarettes. Her family had always been very protective of her, but as she was now 16, they decided it was time for her to have more independence. The police investigating Claire's murder had sealed off the area and extensive searches were being carried out. It became clear to the officers that the attack had taken place in an alleyway just off the London Road. There was very little forensic evidence, so police began working with the theory that she had been murdered by someone she knew. People were understandably very frightened. Several witnesses reported seeing a man in a light-colored jacket walking down the road at that time. What was really worrying was that this was not the first attack like this to have taken place in the area. A few years before, on December 21, 1988, a 27-year-old woman was heading home from a night shift. She had been set upon by a man armed with a gun and a knife, abducted and taken to a nearby quarry. He had cut her clothes off and forced her into obscene positions as he took photographs of her. He gagged her with toilet rolls and repeatedly stabbed the knife into the ground extremely close to her head. He repeatedly attempted to rape her before strangling her with a school tie, which broke. He then stabbed her in the back 5 times. She lost consciousness and he covered her with dirt and ran away. She lay there all night, naked and freezing cold, before she miraculously woke up. She was able to crawl down the embankment and get the attention of quarry workers, who were then able to call for help. She would spend 9 days in intensive care, recovering from her physical injuries. Could Claire's killer have been the same person? The day after Claire Tiltman's murder, the police received a call from a man. He said he had been driving in the area at the time and he had seen a man with dark curly hair on the zebra crossing near the murder scene at around 6:30. A week later, this witness was interviewed and his story was now different. He said he had seen someone walking down London Road between 5:45 and 5:55 p.m. and didn't mention the zebra crossing. He said he was out delivering leaflets with his mother, who was a local counselor, and they had then returned home to Milton Street. Hundreds of people have attended the funeral of 16-year-old Claire Tiltman, the grammar school girl stabbed to death in an alley close to her home at Greenhithe near Dartford. Meanwhile, her parents have today spoken of their anguish that Claire's killer is still at large. They told our Kent reporter, Graham Machen, that even during the funeral, they were haunted by the thought that the murderer could have been amongst the congregation. More than 200 friends, Well-wishers and family members packed Eltham Crematorium in southeast London today to pay their respects to Claire Tiltman. Members of the Royal British Legion, who sang happy birthday to Claire just days before her murder, were there. So too were school friends and some of the detectives hunting her killer. Flowers and wreaths were laid in a private service held at the crematorium's chapel. Then, after a wake at the Green Hive Legion Club, Claire's parents talked about their grief and how they're haunted by the knowledge that the killer is still at large. You look around and you hope it's someone you don't know. But we don't know. Because unfortunately you start to look. I don't even know if that person was there today. And that's how I felt. Because it could have been there. Even during the funeral. Yep, there was a lot of people I didn't see. I knew that they were there. It's a bit like going back to the night that I was told. You're in a state of shock. But I don't know. That person could be there. I hope that they weren't, but they could be. Talking about the religious side of it, you sort of, no, I mean, what's happened? I will never ever forgive. No, you'll never forgive the person? Never ever. For whatever reason. Because no one ever, if it was my worst day, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. No way. Because what that person done, there is no excuse. But that person's got to be caught. Tonight, police repeated their appeal for anyone with information to come forward. As the police believed she had been murdered by someone she knew, officers were sat amongst those attending, watching, wondering if her killer was there. Her mother said that she had an extremely strong gut feeling that Claire's killer had been sat amongst them at the funeral. We now move on to another rather grim case that's made national headlines. Another case, I'm afraid, that seems to be a killing for the sake of it. The victim was 16-year-old Claire Tiltman, and she was picked, apparently, at random. Almost everyone you see in what follows, fire and ambulance crews, witnesses and friends, are the real people involved who've helped us to reenact events. Claire had a mile to walk to Vicky's home. Were you driving down the A226, here called the London Road, through Greenhithe, Kent, between Dartford and Gravesend? It's not clear why Claire went into this alley. Maybe she was forced here. Did you see anyone nearby? About 30 seconds later, Michael Godfrey was turning onto London Road. Because she was against a wall, it looked as though it was a hit-and-run car accident. The obvious thing, it's right by a road. I've used first aid before, but never to that extent. I'm sure that Claire would have sensed that somebody was with her in that last moment. No one likes to think their husband, boyfriend, son, any relative is capable of doing this. But to come forward, because I know that I would have to, because I don't think I could live with myself knowing what that person's done. Maybe he was capable of doing it again. Oh, and tell her that must be your fear. This guy's going to do it again. Yes, it is. This was a particularly savage attack. Claire was stabbed several times with a large knife, and I think it's very likely that this person could strike again. You mentioned she'd been stabbed with a very unusually large knife. It's not the sort of knife some would sort of carry, like a pen knife. Is it possible this guy's got an obsession with knives, a fascination with them? Certainly couldn't rule that out. I mean, it was a large knife, and it's not the sort of thing you would normally carry around, say, for instance, to do your normal day's work. So it's an unusual weapon. I think certainly after committing an offense as ferocious as this, his behavior would have been abnormal, and someone close to him, a girlfriend, wife, mother, would actually notice a difference in the behavior. As the days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, and before long it was the anniversary of her murder. Her killer still hadn't been caught. Then, the worst fears of the public and police were realized. There was another attack. The 17th of October, 1995, just a few minutes from where Claire Tiltman had been murdered. A woman had been walking under a bridge called the Arches when a man walking towards her had grabbed her and dragged her to the other side of the road, before repeatedly stabbing her. Miraculously, she survived the horrific attack. She said that when she screamed and fell to her knees, she did so in the hope that he would leave her alone, and for some reason he did. Although she wasn't able to give a description, one witness had seen something. They had seen a distinctive white Ford car, owned by a local milkman named Colin Ash Smith, someone who had already been interviewed several times in relation to Claire's murder. Colin Ash Smith was the son of Diane and Aubrey. His mother was a local councillor and mayor. He had a girlfriend, and there seemed on the surface to be nothing out of the ordinary with him, But all was certainly not as it seemed. He would never leave the house without a knife. The investigators got a warrant to conduct a search of his property. As they went through the house bit by bit, room by room, they came across a knife. It was the same one that had been used to attack the woman under the arches. But that wasn't all. Hidden away, they found a diary that Colin had been writing in since the late 1980s. In it, he admitted to being the person behind the attack on the woman in the quarry. One of the entries referred to this attack as a masterpiece and 95% successful. When he found out the following day on the news that his victim had survived, he had vowed to do a better job next time. The piece of the tie that had broken during the attempt to strangle her was also found in his Ford Capri. Clothes stained with blood were also found. The diaries painted a dark and disturbing picture of Colin Ash Smith. He wrote about an attempt to break into a care home for the elderly, which he had rated at 20%. At Old People's Home, total abysmal failure, rather not talk about it. Another entry read, "My friends jokingly called me the Swanscombe Psycho, but they never suspected anything. In the end, I got away with it. I even rang the police and told them some details about the attack. I also said if she, the victim, gave any description of me, I would kill a schoolgirl." The diary contained plans to commit more murders, but it didn't contain anything to do with the murder of Claire Tiltman. He admitted to the attack on the woman at the quarry in 1988, and to stabbing the woman into the arches in 1995. On the 20th of December 1996, he was given 3 life sentences for these offenses. When talking about the attack he had committed in 1995, he said he had been seething with rage that day, as he had wrongly believed his partner was being unfaithful. He had arranged to collect her from work, but he got there 15 minutes late, and by which point she had already gone. I had it in my head that she was seeing someone else, and I thought she got a lift with him, he said. He then started to drive around, looking for anyone to take his anger out on. He had thought about attacking a man he had seen, but then changed his mind and decided to attack a woman. I thought they will do instead, he said. Colin said he felt relieved after stabbing her, and he didn't care about what happened to her. He later said he felt like a bit of a scumbag for doing it. She should have been able to go about her business without me coming across her. After attacking her, he had returned home to hide the knife before going back out to the pub to play pool. Then the police discovered something interesting. Colin Ash Smith had attended Claire's funeral. He knew her as they used to go to the same British Legion club for socializing with their families. Claire had celebrated her 16th birthday there. One of those in attendance was Colin. He was interviewed again in December 1995, and he said the description they had given of a man who had been seen in the area at the time of Claire's murder matched someone he had seen. This person was described as being in his 20s, 5 feet 9 or 5 feet 10, blonde hair with shaved back and sides, a roundish face and what were called baby-type features. He said, "The description of the person you gave me, I recognize him. I know him from the RBL. He used to play pool and he knew Claire. He used to play pool with Claire." He said he couldn't remember his name, but he did know that he had moved shortly after the murder. "I asked my friend what happened to the bloke as I'd not seen him for a while. He said he lives at the back of me." He added he would recognize the street, but couldn't remember the name. He said the last time he had seen him was Claire's funeral, but he hadn't spoken to him. He was interviewed again on the 14th of December, and police said they had interviewed a man in relation to what Colin had said, but added that this man had not had blonde hair for the past decade, and he was subsequently completely ruled out. Was this an attempt by Colin to put somebody else under the spotlight? Even though Colin fit the offender profile, knew the area, and knew the victim, there was one massive problem. Colin Ash Smith had an alibi. His mother Diane was the town mayor and local councillor. She said he had been with her that night as she was out giving out leaflets, but this story was one they had heard before. It turned out that Colin was the person who had called the police a day after Claire's murder, saying he had seen a man with dark curly hair on the crossing. It would also be revealed that the alibi his mother had provided him with was false. Both his parents knew he carried a knife, and after Claire's murder, his father took it away from him and got rid of it. In 1997, Colin's father Aubrey was actually sentenced to 12 months in prison for perverting the course of justice. Shortly before the home had been due to be searched in relation to Claire's murder, he had destroyed the knife that Colin owned. Aubrey admitted to boiling the knife, taking it apart, and then throwing it away. The judge said that this raised questions about Colin's involvement in the murder of Claire Tiltman. Those questions might have been answered if the knife had not been destroyed, he said. Outside court, Colin's mother Diane said that neither she, Aubrey, or Colin had anything to do with Claire's murder, but Claire's parents were convinced Colin was their daughter's killer. Colin's mother was also later arrested after she told the TV program Meridian Focus that she had ordered the knife to be disposed of while the police had questioned Colin. She said that she felt they were being harassed. "I expect I'll get arrested and put away now, but I said, for Christ's sake, get rid of that bloody knife. You know what the police are like. They'll come and put us away." One particularly disturbing part of Colin's personality was also looked into: his pattern of obsessive behavior. He would become fixated on women and stalk them for months, breaking into 2 of their houses too. One of them was married to a former colleague, and he admitted that he had wanted to rape her. This plan was referred to as the Jarvis attack, which he had given a rating of 50%. Richard Jarvis had worked with Colin and had been due to be at a meeting, but then had come home early. Richard and his wife Debbie discovered that someone had broken into their home. Her nightdress had been cut up and hung on the back of the bathroom door. Colin had written that he had been in full swing of my psycho state of mind. I was going to use the knife to threaten her to do anything I thought of at the time, probably sexually assault her. He had also written about a fictional sexual encounter with Debbie that had been interrupted by Richard, an encounter that had never happened. In his prison cell, sexual fantasies he had written were found about a woman from 2 decades before that he barely even knew. But it wasn't just Colin Ashsmith that they were looking into. There were 2 other potential suspects, one of which was Peter Rivers, who had strangled and stabbed his mother to death in the house they shared on Welcome Avenue in February of 1994. He then took his own life. In a note he left behind, he wrote, "Mum was beginning to suspect me of killing Claire." The other suspect is someone whose crimes we have covered on Truly Criminal before, Robert Napper. Serial rapist Robert Napper murdered 3, Rachel Nichol on Wimbledon Common in 1992, and Samantha Bissett and her 4-year-old daughter Jasmine in southeast London in 1993. He was only brought to justice for the murder of Rachel in 2008. His crimes also involved knives, and they were extremely frenzied and violent. As the years ticked by, the case continued to grow colder, and it had now been 10 years since Claire was killed. A memorial plaque had been put up for her on London Road, and in 2003, in an appalling act of vandalism, it was pulled off the wall. The community had not forgotten about Claire. Those who went to school with her continued to send her parents Christmas cards, as did her old teachers. In her parents' home, her last school photograph was hung up on the wall, and the plaque given to her by the fire station for the volunteering work she had done with them. Her parents also had up a photograph of Owen Taylor. Owen Taylor had led the investigation into Claire's murder, but had sadly passed away in 1997. The plaque that had been put up by Kent Police was also in his memory, as he had worked tirelessly to bring her killer to justice. Knowing that their daughter's killer had still not been caught caused Cliff and Linda an indescribable amount of pain. Linda said, "You look around and you hope that it's someone you don't know. But we don't know. I will never ever forgive that person for whatever reason. That person's got to be caught." In 2003, the Criminal Justice Act came into law, and it meant that jurors would be allowed to hear about a defendant's bad character during a trial and previous convictions. Any changes in the law obviously have huge implications for the criminal justice system, but in Claire's case, it would prove to be monumental. But more tragedy would strike when, in 2008, Claire's mother Linda died at the age of just 56 from cancer. On the anniversary of Claire's death in 2012, her father issued a plea for any new information. "It was mean of me. I've never given up hope. Never have done, never will do. It's possibly been 17 years, a long time. But yeah, never given up hope. I can't begin to put into words how this has affected our family. She would have been 35 now. I miss her to bits. Claire has gone, her mum has gone. There is now only me. I try to stay strong, but will still hide and cry my eyes out for an hour. Tragically, on September 12th of that year, Cliff would also pass away at the age of 62. Detective Chief Inspector Rob Vinson said, "Last month, a good man went to his grave without ever seeing justice being served for the murder of his only daughter. This isn't the end of our investigation. We have always maintained that someone has information about this murder, and we will continue to investigate it. I hope that the sad news of Cliff's passing might prompt someone to finally come forward with the key piece of information that we need to identify Claire's killer and help us bring this case to a successful conclusion." The following year, on the 20th anniversary of Claire's death, her friends held a candlelit walk along the route she had taken that night to try and generate any new leads. The then Prime Minister David Cameron joined the appeal for new information and added that the government would do everything it could to help the inquiry. Despite the years that have passed since Claire Tiltman was brutally stabbed to death, the pain of losing her that day is still so raw. And then I just saw my mom's car pull up on the driveway and I just knew. My mom just came through in tears. I just knew, and we all kind of blocked the memories. We sort of put them aside, and I think this has really brought it back up to the surface, and we're all only just beginning to deal with this now 20 years later. The investigation is very much active and certainly subject to an ongoing cold case investigation. I'm really looking at a lot of forensic work around the case and trying to use modern and new and up-to-date techniques around DNA capture and forensics. And tonight there'll be a vigil and a candlelit procession ending here, the place at which Claire's body was found 20 years ago today. We want people to come out on this walk today and show their support and really help us get Claire's name back out there. We want justice for Claire. Linda Hardy, BBC Southeast Today, Green Hive. At the same time, a cold case review was launched in a bid to try and finally solve it. As Colin Ashsmith was still on their radar, they decided to talk with someone who had shared a cell with him, a man named Stefan, and he had something very interesting to say. Colin mentioned something about a zebra crossing and being close to a zebra crossing. The impression I got from Colin was telling me that he was angry and was looking for something or someone. He said he had seen someone on the crossing and snapped and attacked. There had been no crossings in the area for the two attacks he had been convicted for, but there had been a crossing at the site of Claire's murder. Following Stefan's statement, in September 2013, Colin's family home in Kent was searched. A newspaper that marked the one-year anniversary of Claire's death was discovered. The intense police search of 14 Myrtle Place in Stone near Dartford started early this morning. It is the former home of Colin Ashsmith, currently serving 3 life sentences for attempted murder and attempted rape of 2 women. I just don't know what I can't stop counting. His father denies his son had anything to do with Claire Tiltman's death. The murky alleyway in Green Hive, where Claire Tiltman was brutally murdered, is about 2 miles from the house which police have today been searching. Although Claire Tiltman's parents are no longer alive, her school friends are still desperate for justice. Evidence bags were removed from the property today. Neighbors remember the house being searched in the past. I was really young at the time, but now it's all come back now. What do you know of Colin Ashsmith when he lived here? Not a lot of him because he was a bit of a way out there. You know, he was always going places. The next thing we know, he was arrested. That was it. Although police accept this as part of their ongoing inquiry into the historic murder of Claire Tiltman, they will not say what has prompted the search. Because of the change in the law in 2003, his diaries, which had detailed attacks and planned attacks, could now be used as evidence. Nigel Pilkington, head of the Complex Casework Unit for the Crown Prosecution Service Southeast, said it took several years for the authorities to grapple with how this new law could be put into practice. He said although bad character provisions came into force in 2003, we were all a bit unsure about how it could be used. What is very clear is we can't run a case on bad character alone. It wouldn't be fair to try somebody on just there. We say the similarities of this offending means that the person who attacked in 1995 had the identity of the attacker of Claire Tiltman. Bad character isn't just about previous convictions, it's about the other aspects of character, his sexual fantasies and his other assaults and attacks. How likely is it that an attack of almost an exact similar nature takes place in 1995, in which a person gets stabbed for no reason 14 times, and that is exactly what happened to Claire. This was an attack that was entirely motiveless, which is an extremely rare event. How likely is it that it would be repeated later? There are other similarities which are strikingly similar. The 12th of February 2014, an announcement was made. Nigel Pilkington said, in November 2012, I received a file of evidence from the Kent and Essex Serious Crimes Directorate relating to the murder of Claire Tiltman on the 18th of January 1993. The investigation by the police has been a lengthy and complex one. Following further investigation, my review of all the evidence in the case has now been completed, and I have concluded that there is sufficient evidence and that it is in the public interest to prosecute Colin Ashsmith for murder of Claire Tiltman. Colin Ashsmith was charged with murder on the same day. He was due to be considered for release by the parole board for the 2 other attacks he had carried out. Detective Superintendent Rob Vinson from the cold case team said Claire Tiltman's unsolved death is one of the longest-running cases for Kent police and has remained in the forefront of the minds of investigating officers for over 2 decades. On November 6th, the trial of Colin Ashsmith would start. Prosecutor Brian Altman QC said that Colin got a warped pleasure from the savage attack on Claire. This was a killing for the sake of killing, carried out by a ruthless and predatory armed killer who attacked his chosen victim rapidly and stealthily, allowing her no time for defense or escape, he said. During the trial, Colin said he would go for walks during the night, carrying a knife, looking for someone to attack. I would wait for my mom and dad to go to sleep first and then I would go out. I was 19 or 20. That was the first time I started doing it in 1988. I used to do it quite regularly. I used to call them my midnight walks. I was hoping I would see someone and provoke someone into attacking me. Why had he attacked the woman in 1988 at the quarry? I wanted to feel empowered, that I had control over someone, that I wasn't a doormat. One key piece of evidence had been the description of the man who had been seen by the crossing, and Colin did fit that description. The man was also described as wearing a light jacket. Colin owned a light jacket and he had worn it both on the night of Claire's murder and to her funeral. Colin also spoke about how he had known her parents. After it happened, my dad and I volunteered to help support them in any way we could through the British Legion Club, and I got to know them reasonably well, her parents. He was asked by the defense about the murder. Colin said seeing the impact it had had on Claire's mom and dad had angered him, and that he wanted to kill whoever had killed Claire. His former girlfriend had previously said that he had been behaving oddly in the days following Claire's murder, but he said that he was just upset, as were many locals. He was asked by the defense if he liked women, and he said yes and no. I didn't like them because I felt they had power over me. My own perception of them was that I couldn't trust them because they used me. I felt worthless, low self-esteem, and I had no confidence around other people. I wasn't happy around most people. He said that he had a collection of between 20 and 30 knives, and he always carried one with him. His weapons collection didn't stop there. He also had a crossbow, an air rifle, an air pistol, and an imitation magnum. He would show this collection off to his colleagues or acquaintances. Is it possible this guy's got an obsession with knives, a fascination with them? Certainly couldn't rule that out. I mean, it was a large knife, and it's not the sort of thing you would normally carry around, say for instance, to do your normal day's work. So it's an unusual weapon. One of the people to testify in court was Stefan, whose statement about what Colin had told him when they were in prison together had been integral to the investigation, with the key detail of Colin mentioning a crossing. In court, Stefan now said he may have confused his comments with another inmate and said that he only had a vague idea of the crimes Colin had been convicted of. One of the things we would joke about was that he'd stabbed his victim multiple times and missed every vital organ. The joke was that we wouldn't have him on the prison darts team as a result. He said that his medication had caused his memory to suffer, and he couldn't clearly remember the conversation he had had with law enforcement the previous year or making the statement. Knowing now that Colin had called the police the day after Claire's murder, it didn't seem to make any sense. The prosecution said that he had done this as he feared someone had seen him or his vehicle that night, so he was calling to try and put the spotlight on someone else. In changing his story, he had made a fundamental mistake of putting himself in the area at that time. Even though Claire's parents had not lived to see the trial take place, her friends had made sure to bring a photo of them to court, ensuring that they would not be forgotten. Her best friend Lisa had come down from Scotland to be there for the trial. She wanted her friend to be remembered for who she was and the closeness that she had to her family. We've spoken a lot about how much Linda and Cliff loved Claire. She was their world, but until now we've never talked about how much she loved them. They had one of the strongest bonds I have ever seen in a family. Her parents were her idols, and she was never embarrassed to say that or to show it. More tragedy would strike when during the trial Linda's cousin Len suffered a stroke in the courtroom. He would have to spend time in hospital recovering from this. One of the things that was discussed were the allegations that Colin's mother had used her position on the council to ask the police about the inquiry, specifically a car being sought. The former mayor Philip Crow said he and two other councillors, including Colin's mom, had been invited to go to a police briefing about the case. Many locals were understandably worried, and for them as their representatives it was important that they were kept in the loop so they could at least try and make people feel more at ease. He said that during this briefing she had kept asking about the car they were looking for. She kept coming back to the vehicle. There was a reluctance to let the questioning go to other areas, he recalled. Following Claire's murder, Colin was described as being withdrawn and aggressive. He had stopped going to the British Legion Club where he had met Claire, as there were photographs of her on display. He would also act out play attacks on his partner. Due to the change in the law, his diary entries were allowed to be used as evidence as to his character and patterns of behavior. The jury heard about his plans to attack women, with one detailing how he had spotted a woman alone at a train station. It said, "Alone at a railway station, fully deserted, apart from me and a woman, aged around 30 for 25 minutes, but I bottled it. It was late at night, all arrangements were made, where to take her, where to hide her body, escape route, everything down to the last detail, but I bottled it. Lucky for her I did, I suppose." The 11th of December 2014, after a 5-week-long trial and 3.5 hours of deliberations, the verdict was in. Today, a jury at the Inner London Crown Court found Colin Ash Smith guilty of murdering the schoolgirl in what was described as a frenzied attack. He showed no emotion as the verdict was read. He was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 21 years. He was not in court for the sentencing as he refused to appear. He also refused to listen to the victim impact statements. Judge Mr. Justice Sweeney said, "I have no doubt that this was a premeditated murder that you carried out because of the feeling of power that it gave you. In so doing, you not only ended Claire's young life, which was so full of promise, but you also caused unbearable grief and upset to her family and friends. I would also like to commend the members of Claire's family and her friends who have attended this trial for the dignified way in which they have conducted themselves, and I express my sorrow for the burden they have had to carry for many years at Claire's untimely loss." The prosecutor read statements from Claire's best friend Lisa and her uncle Roger, which detailed the devastation that this had caused, especially for Cliff and Linda. Her uncle said that all of their hopes and dreams had ended the night Claire was murdered. "It is very sad that Cliff and Lynn could not be in court today to see the person who killed Claire has finally been brought to justice." While serving his sentence at HMP Durham, Colin launched an appeal. His appeal said that the trial judge, Mr. Justice Sweeney, had wrongly allowed material referred to as gravely prejudicial to be presented to the jury. The Court of Appeal dismissed his application for permission to appeal, with Lord Justice Davis saying his case was unarguable. The hunt for Claire's killer was one of the biggest that Kent police had ever faced. More than 2,500 statements were taken, 1,500 witnesses were spoken to, there were 40,000 documents and more than 20,000 people on the database. All these years later, the community has made sure that Claire Tiltman has not been forgotten. In a tribute to Claire, a road was named after her in Greenhithe and a memorial bench was put up. Another road rename was approved by Dartford Council. Fast Track Manor Way became Tiltman Avenue. In 2022, a new eco-center named after Claire was opened, which is used for various eco-friendly and educational activities for children and young people. Her friend Emma said that it was lovely to see something so positive being associated with Claire. To mark the 30th anniversary of her death, Stone Parish Council planted Claire roses in her memory. The story of Claire Tiltman is a devastating one. A young woman with her entire life ahead of her. Things to do, people to see and dreams to achieve, all of which were so brutally ripped away from her. But it is also a story of hope. It is a story of tireless work and effort and a refusal to let her name be forgotten. This case is perhaps best summed up by the Justice for Claire group. They issued the following statement after the sentencing. It is nearly 22 years since Claire was cruelly taken away from us at the age of just 16. Today, we finally know who murdered her. What we will never understand is why. We want to thank Kent Police and the CPS for all their hard work on the case, and most importantly, for never ever giving up. Some of the police officers involved in this case have shown a level of dedication far above and beyond the call of duty for over 2 decades, and we can never thank them enough. Like them, we have always believed that one day there would be justice for Claire, and today that has at last been done. But we should not be here speaking to you today. It should be Claire's parents, Linda and Cliff. This murder destroyed an entire family, and the ripples are still being felt today. Today we reclaim our friend and remember her for the wonderful person she was rather than what happened to her. We are certain by now that she would have fulfilled her ambition of becoming a firefighter. Her murder stopped her achieving that dream, and we can only wonder what else it stopped her from doing. She could have had a successful career and saved lives, become a wife and mother. It deprived Linda and Cliff of seeing their daughter grow up and thrive. Story 6. Now we're diving into a chilling case about someone who caused a bloodbath in a peaceful town. When a crime happens in a small, quiet place where everyone knows each other, it quickly becomes the talk of the town. But if it's a brutal attack on an entire family, something that's never happened before, it doesn't just get people talking, it leads to rumors, speculations, and gruesome stories that eventually become an urban legend. This tragic event took place in the fall of 2010 in a small Australian town called Kapunda, with a population of only 3,000. It's located near the Light River and Barossa Valley in South Australia. The whole town was shocked by the horrific news of a family being massacred. The local police, who had never seen anything like this, were left baffled. Rumors quickly spread, and the story was told in many different ways. Things got so out of control that the police had to partially classify the case to avoid further panic and prevent leaks. The family involved was well known and respected in the town. They had no known enemies, and there seemed to be no clear motive for the crime. At first it appeared to be a senseless act of violence, leading detectives to believe it might have been the work of a madman. Surprisingly, the real culprit wasn't even considered a suspect at first, and might have gotten away with it if he hadn't accidentally revealed himself later on. Let's talk about the Rowe family. The head of the family, Andrew Rowe, was born in England in 1965. When he was just 3 years old, he and his parents moved to Australia, where they decided to stay. They settled in a suburb of Adelaide, and Andrew grew up there, attending school. He was known to be friendly, had a great sense of humor, made lots of friends, and enjoyed fishing with his dad. After high school, while studying in Adelaide, Andrew met Rose, a cheerful young woman just a year younger than him. The two quickly developed a romantic relationship, and in 1985 they got married in a small ceremony with only close friends and family. 2 years later, in 1987, they had their first child, a boy named Christopher. In 1994, Andrew and Rose Rowe welcomed their second child, a daughter named Chantel. The family settled in the quiet town of Kapunda and started their own carpet cleaning business. The business thrived, giving them financial stability. Their children attended local schools, where both performed well academically. Christopher, their eldest son, took up guitar and became interested in music, while Chantel excelled in painting, danced, and played basketball. She was known for being kind-hearted and always willing to help others. Chantel dreamed of becoming a lawyer, and Christopher planned to pursue a career in programming and technology. The Rowe family was close-knit and happy. By the summer of 2010, 23-year-old Christopher had moved out to live with his girlfriend, just a few blocks away. In September, 16-year-old Chantel started working part-time as a waitress at a roadside cafe. Since she didn't have her driver's license yet, her father or brother would drive her to work, though she looked forward to getting her own license soon. The crime scene was so horrifying that even seasoned detectives from Adelaide were shocked. Inside the house, it looked like a scene from a horror movie, with blood splattered everywhere on the floor, walls, furniture, curtains, and even the ceiling. The bodies of 45-year-old Andrew and 44-year-old Rose were found in the kitchen, severely disfigured, while Chantel's body lay in her bedroom, brutally torn. Each family member had suffered multiple stab wounds and had been dead long before the police and paramedics arrived. Detectives quickly suspected that the crime was personal, as nothing was stolen. Valuables like phones, a laptop, an expensive camera, and even money were left in plain sight. This suggested that the killer wasn't motivated by robbery. The brutality also hinted that more than one person might have been involved, as it would have been difficult for a single individual to overpower 3 adults. Alternatively, the perpetrator could have been a physically strong man. Investigators noticed that someone had clumsily tried to clean the crime scene, wiping away footprints in some areas, but the attempt was abandoned. Bloody shoe prints were also found leading to the door, but they suddenly stopped, implying the killer might have removed his shoes and left in socks. There were no signs of forced entry, which suggested that the family had likely known the killer and willingly let him inside, or he had entered through some other means. The family had no known enemies, leaving everyone puzzled as to who could have committed such a horrific crime. Some clear fingerprints were found on the door to Chantel's room, but they didn't match anyone in the police database, indicating that the person responsible had never been caught for any previous crimes. The house was immediately sealed off as a crime scene, and the surrounding area was fenced off to keep away curious onlookers and the press, who had quickly gathered at the scene. To avoid scaring the killer into hiding or fleeing, the police chose not to release too many details about the investigation. Still, rumors of a maniac spread quickly through the small town. People became fearful, avoiding the streets at night and locking their doors tightly. As strange as it sounds, the first person suspected of the crime was Christopher, the only surviving family member. At the time of the murders, he was on vacation with his fiancée in Moreton Bay, Queensland, on the Pacific coast. However, authorities had to investigate all possibilities, no matter how unlikely they seemed. Christopher was the first to raise the alarm when he couldn't get in touch with his family, and he took the next flight home after hearing the devastating news. His alibi and fingerprints were quickly checked, and it was confirmed that he was on the other side of the continent at the time of the crime, so he was ruled out as a suspect. A strange detail emerged from the investigation after the murders. The killer changed into clean clothes and lay on the bed. Bloody drag marks near Chantal's bed indicated that she had likely tried to hide under it, but the killer had pulled her out. Forensic experts also determined that she had been sexually assaulted before her death. This further suggested that the crime was deeply personal, filled with senseless cruelty. Andrew, the head of the family, suffered over 30 stab wounds while Rose was stabbed 50 times. Evidence showed she had been attacked twice and had even tried to call for help after the first attack. Chantal had 33 stab wounds and had been sexually assaulted. Investigators immediately looked into Chantal's personal life, focusing on whether she had been in a relationship or had any obsessive admirers. It was soon revealed that she had been dating a boy named Dylan for about a year. They both attended the same school, and at 16 years old, Dylan didn't initially seem capable of committing such a brutal crime. Nonetheless, detectives needed to interview him, check his alibi, and hear his thoughts on whether anyone might have wanted to harm Chantal or her family. Dylan cooperated fully with the police, expressing his deep grief over Chantal's death. He explained that they had a loving relationship and planned to marry once they were older. He was devastated by her loss and didn't know how to cope. At the time of the murders, Dylan had been in a nearby city attending his grandfather's anniversary. His alibi was confirmed by dozens of witnesses, and he was ruled out as a suspect. The police had few leads but now had the killer's fingerprints, as well as DNA from the seminal fluid found on Chantal's body. This gave them a crucial piece of evidence that could eventually help them identify the murderer. The DNA extracted from the seminal fluid and fingerprints left at the scene did not match anyone in the police database, adding to the mystery. Interestingly, the family was killed with knives from their own kitchen, suggesting that the attack may not have been premeditated, but rather a spontaneous act of violence. The killer took the murder weapons with him when he left the house. Forensic experts determined the time of death to be between midnight and 2 a.m. A neighbor of the Rowe family reported hearing Rose call for help twice around 1 a.m., followed by a loud thud, but assumed it was a domestic dispute and did not call the police. No strangers were seen near the house that night, and officers meticulously searched the area for any clues or the missing murder weapons. The police also reached out to the local community through the media, asking for any information that could help with the investigation. However, this led to an overwhelming number of tips, many of which were unhelpful or false. People called in to report suspicious individuals, strange cars, and even tried to link the crime to local biker gangs or drug dealers. There were also tips about social media posts from local residents, but none of these leads advanced the investigation. 2 days before the murders, detectives discovered Chantal's expensive camera at the crime scene. Since Chantal was an avid photographer, they hoped the camera might contain useful images. Indeed, they found many pictures, and the most recent ones drew their attention. On November 6th, just 2 days before the massacre, Chantal had hosted a small gathering at her home. Her parents had gone to stay with relatives for the night, so she took advantage of their absence to invite her boyfriend and 3 close friends, along with their partners, for a quiet evening of movie watching and a barbecue. It wasn't a wild party, just a calm, friendly get-together. Chantal took numerous photos that night, capturing everyone enjoying themselves. Some of the guests even posted pictures from the evening on their social media pages, which the police examined for any potential clues. All of Chantal's friends who attended the party stayed overnight at the row house and left the next morning, with Andrew and Rose even cooking breakfast for everyone. Detectives realized it was crucial to interview everyone who had been at the party to see if Chantal had any enemies, envious peers, or stalkers. They also decided to collect fingerprints from each person to compare them with the prints found on Chantal's bedroom door. Chantal's friends were still in shock over the murders, but fully cooperated with the investigation. They came to the station to testify, provided their fingerprints and DNA samples, which didn't the ones found at the crime scene, and allowed the police to access their social media accounts and phones. They recounted the events of what ended up being the last party at the row house. Dylan recalled that on Sunday, Chantal wasn't feeling well and likely had a cold. By the evening, she had developed a fever and called her boss to let him know she wouldn't be able to work the next day. The following morning, at around 5 a.m., Dylan texted her to ask how she was feeling. He saw that his message had been read, but Chantal never responded. What Dylan didn't know at the time was that Chantal and her parents were already dead and the killer had read his message. In a chilling detail, the police discovered that the killer had even tried to respond to Dylan's text, but Chantal's phone account had run out of credit, so the message was never sent. The killer had attempted to create the illusion that Chantal was still alive. Dylan, along with several of Chantal's closest friends, helped the police compile a list of everyone she had been in contact with. Law enforcement systematically worked their way down the list, questioning and checking each person. About a week into the investigation, they reached an 18-year-old named Jason Downey who had previously attended the same high school as Chantal and Dylan. He had graduated the previous year and was now working at a local auto repair shop. Initially, Jason didn't raise any red flags. He was of average height, very thin, and appeared completely harmless. The plan was to ask him a few questions and then let him go. However, during the interview, Jason began to act strangely. Instead of answering the detective's standard questions directly, he became increasingly nervous and his behavior started to raise suspicions. On November 4, 2010, Christopher left for a vacation to Brisbane with his girlfriend, intending to return and prepare for their upcoming wedding. However, on November 8th, Christopher couldn't reach his family and grew increasingly concerned. After learning from his father's office that Andrew hadn't shown up for work, Christopher sensed something was wrong. He asked a friend to check on the house. Around 3 p.m. that day, a patrol car arrived at the row home. When the local police, who were unprepared for such a crime, saw the horrific scene inside, they immediately requested backup, realizing they were dealing with a brutal triple murder. Jason Downey began acting oddly during the police interview. He complained about not being invited to Chantal's party, mentioning that everyone else had a partner and he didn't have a girlfriend. Then, out of nowhere, he claimed to have an alibi for the night of the murders, even though no one had asked about it yet. His odd behavior made the police even more suspicious. As a result, they decided to fully investigate him, including taking his fingerprints and DNA sample. Surprisingly, Downey remained calm and cooperative, agreeing to all the tests without showing any nervousness. This behavior caused the police to briefly doubt their suspicions, but they continued with the procedures. When an expert collected his fingerprints, he noticed fresh, deep cuts on Jason's palms. Downey explained that he had hurt himself while working at the machine shop, but the cuts looked as if they had been made by a thin, sharp object. When the fingerprint results came back, they showed that Downey's prints matched the ones found on Chantal's bedroom door. All that remained was to wait for the DNA results, which would due in 2 days. The police questioned Downey again, asking how his fingerprints ended up in the Rowe family house if he hadn't been there recently. Downey calmly explained that he had visited the house with Dylan about a month and a half earlier, suggesting that's when he might have left the prints. However, this explanation didn't hold up as the prints were fresh and clean, not old or faded. On November 16, 2010, the DNA results came in, confirming that Jason Downey had assaulted Chantal that night and was responsible for the murders of her and her parents. But the question remained, why had he done it? And how did this skinny young man find the strength and rage to commit such a brutal act? Jason was arrested that same day. Now, the detectives needed to uncover the motive behind this horrific massacre. Who was Jason Downey? Jason Downey was born in September 1992 in the Scottish town of Kilmarnock, where he spent his childhood and early teen years. He was the youngest of 2 children and was raised alongside his older brother Jamie. When Jason was just 8 months old, his parents divorced and his mother, Lorraine, took on the role of raising him. His father remarried soon after, and Jason and Jamie had a half-sister named Judy, though they had little contact with her. When Jason was 13, he, his mother, and his brother emigrated to Australia, where they settled in the small town of Kapunda. In their new home, Jason's mother remarried, this time to a local resident. Jason Downey had a difficult time adjusting to life in the small town of Kapunda after growing up in a big city. He despised the quiet provincial atmosphere and longed to leave. At school, Jason struggled socially. His peers found him strange, and most only spoke to him out of pity. He was overly talkative, arrogant, and frequently lied, boasting about his imaginary athletic abilities, popularity, and supposed admirers. In reality, girls ignored him and his odd behavior repelled others. Dylan, Chantal's boyfriend, played on the same basketball team as Jason and felt sorry for him. Out of kindness, Dylan started inviting Jason to friendly gatherings and even introduced him to Chantal, a decision that would have disastrous consequences. Chantal, who was polite and empathetic, treated Jason kindly, and she had even defended him from other teenagers on occasion. Her friendly demeanor, however, led Jason to develop an intense crush on her, which soon turned into an unhealthy obsession. Jason began to believe that Chantal harbored secret feelings for him but couldn't express them because of her relationship with Dylan. Although Chantal never encouraged Jason's advances or gave him any reason to hope, he misinterpreted her kindness. Over time, his infatuation morphed into a delusional fantasy in which he believed that he and Chantal were meant to be together. Jason became consumed by these thoughts, mistaking her politeness for love, while no one around him noticed the depth of his obsession. Once the police were certain that Jason was responsible for the murders, they knew they had to act quickly to arrest him. However, they were unsure of how best to proceed, fearing that Jason could pose a danger to himself or others. To avoid any potential complications, they decided to lure him to the police station under a benign pretext. When Jason arrived, he was immediately placed in handcuffs, but surprisingly, he showed no emotion. He wasn't startled, scared, or angry. He remained completely calm. During his first interrogation, Jason denied all accusations. He tried to explain away the evidence, claiming that he had left his fingerprints in the Rowe family home during his previous visit a month and a half earlier. When questioned about how his DNA was found on Chantal's body, Jason made a desperate claim. He said that during that same visit, he and Chantal had consensual intimacy. However, this story was easily disproven. The forensic evidence made it clear that the seminal fluid found on Chantal's body could not have remained there for such a long period, either inside or outside her body. This false narrative further exposed Jason's lies and guilt. Jason Downey's confession revealed a disturbing sequence of events that led to the brutal murders of Chantel and her parents. After an argument with his mother and stepfather, Jason claimed he decided to sleep in his car. However, after speaking with Dylan, who mentioned Chantel was sick and staying home, Jason became obsessed with seeing her. His initial plan was simply to drive by her house and look through the windows, something he had done many times before due to his fixation on her. When Jason arrived at the Rowe family's home, it was dark inside, so he parked his car at the end of the street and returned on foot. He found a small bathroom window left open, and being thin, he was able to squeeze through it without much difficulty. Once inside, Jason sat quietly in the bathroom for about half an hour, listening to ensure that everyone in the house had gone to bed. Jason later claimed that his intention was to confess his feelings to Chantel. However, he took a knife from the kitchen before entering her bedroom, a fact he could not explain logically. Investigators believed that Jason had more sinister intentions from the beginning, likely planning to use the knife to threaten and control Chantel in order to fulfill his obsessive desires. When Jason entered Chantel's room and attempted to assault her, she resisted. This resistance triggered a violent rage in Jason, leading him to stab her repeatedly. The horrific attack woke her parents, Andrew and Rose, who rushed to help their daughter. However, Jason, now in a frenzied state, turned his knife on them as well, brutally stabbing both Andrew and Rose to death. In his confession, Jason claimed he acted out of an uncontrollable passion, but the calculated nature of his actions sneaking into the house, bringing a weapon, and murdering not just Chantel but her parents suggested otherwise. His confession did little to minimize his guilt, despite his attempt to downplay his responsibility. As the investigation progressed, more damning evidence against Jason surfaced. A pair of blood-stained shoes was found discarded in a deserted area, and the blood on them matched that of all three victims. The sole prints from these shoes matched the bloody footprints found at the crime scene, and inside the shoes were traces of Jason's sweat, further implicating him. Despite Jason's attempts to cooperate with investigators promising, for example, to show them where he had disposed of the knives used in the murders, the murder weapons were never recovered, leading detectives to suspect that he was still trying to manipulate the situation. Jason's confession did help reconstruct the timeline of events, but it did little to change the gruesome reality of his crime. His obsession with Chantel, combined with his inability to control his urges, had driven him to commit an unimaginable act of violence, wiping out an entire family in the process. The trial of Jason Downey concluded with a sentence that echoed the severity of his crimes. In the fall of 2011, nearly a year after the brutal murders of Chantel Rowe and her parents, Jason stood trial. Throughout the proceedings, he remained emotionless, often changing his testimony and showing no remorse for his actions. He continued to claim that he had no memory of killing the Rowe family and insisted that he had loved Chantel, even though his actions told a much darker story. One detail that stood out during the trial was that after the massacre, Jason had taken Chantel's pendant and chain, which were later found during a search of his room and car. This act underscored his obsession with her, as he tried to keep a piece of her with him, even after her death. Despite his claim that the tragedy could have been avoided if Chantel had invited him to the party she hosted before her death, it was clear that his feelings of rejection and obsession had driven him to commit the horrific act. Throughout the trial, Jason maintained a calm and indifferent demeanor. He ultimately pleaded guilty, hoping for a lighter sentence. He openly admitted to his brother that this was the reason for his guilty plea to avoid life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. In the end, on April 19, 2012, Jason Downey was sentenced to life imprisonment, with the possibility of parole after 35 years. Had he not pleaded guilty, he would have had to serve at least 45 years before being eligible for parole. Chantel's brother, Christopher Rowe, who lost his entire family in the massacre, expressed that while he believed the punishment was just, no court sentence could ever heal the pain of losing his loved ones. In memory of his parents and sister, Christopher had their names tattooed on his body. Despite the grief and tragedy, Christopher has since found a way to rebuild his life. He is now married and raising his son, Kobe, honoring the memory of his family while moving forward with his own. The case left an indelible mark on all involved, with Jason Downey's lack of remorse and cold demeanor continuing to haunt those who followed the trial. And the night deepens. Thank you for being here with me at Radio Night Crime. True crime stories remind us of life's mysteries and the need to stay aware, even in the stillness of the night. If you enjoyed tonight's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let the sound of the rain lull you to sleep, and until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night keep you company.